We are good to go. Everybody's ready. We will call the meeting to order at 9 o'clock and ask a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And to A1 consent agenda, and we would make a motion to adopt that. Moved, seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Moving right down then to B1, DVP F 2025.002-DVP, and I'll refer to CEO, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application is seeking a variance to the interior side parcel line setback that applies to the subject property in order to formalize an existing livestock shelter, i.e. the chicken coop, with the staff recommendation being that development variance permit F 2025.02 allow for the construction of a livestock shelter at 601 Valiant Drive be approved. Staff's here to answer questions. No power play.
And do we have any questions? Anything directed at staff? Anybody make a motion? Director Gittins?
Thanks. This also went through the APC, and the APC is in agreement as well. So I would administrative recommendation.
And any seconded. Any discussion? Director Taylor?
Yeah, so I think I'm all in favor of backyard chickens and stuff like that, but some properties aren't designed for it. And I just look at the location of this coop, and I can think of a lot of other locations on that property that would have been better and more friendly to the neighbor. And if the approval had been requested before the thing got built, probably would have been required. So I got a problem with this, and I also just feel, when do we? So if you don't have to follow the setback requirements in this case because you built it first, why do we even have setback requirements? Why do we even have the requirements for livestock? So, I know this has been going on in the neighborhood, way bigger issue than it used to have been. But we're here now.
Thank you for that, Director Gittins.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Director Taylor. That's why I put it over to the APC. I share the same thing. There was a short discussion with the APC. They seem to not have any concerns with it. So that, and also with the staff recommendation, it's hard to stand and say no to this when that's what the other voices are. But I don't disagree.
Any other comments? Director Taylor?
Yeah, I'll be voting against.
Okay, any others? Thank you. Motions on the floor. All in favor? And opposed? Director Taylor. Oh, sorry. Moving on to B2, TUP E 2025.005-TUP. Again, refer to the CEO, please.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sometimes not.
Now it's working. Okay. This application is seeking the operation of a vacation rental use with a single detached dwelling on the subject property through issuance of a temporary use permit, with staff recommendation being that temporary use permit number E 2025.05 to allow vacation rental use at 6900 Indian Rock Road be approved. No PowerPoint presentation, and staff's here to answer questions.
Thanks, CEO. And are there any questions? Director Taylor?
I'm confused. When I read the briefing material that's provided by the neighbor, it sounds like there's 2 homes on the property, and the water license is only for 1 home. And now they're trying to separate the water system. So does that not factor into our decision criteria?
Staff?
So the board's benefit from a staff perspective, when we look at this, and I think I mentioned before that we generally see vacation rentals as an accessory residential use. And I'm trying to recall this because I believe this property has been before the board in the past, probably within the past 10 years in relation to the development of the second dwelling. So that was approved previously. The 2 dwelling units are established, have been there for a number of years. What we're being asked to consider today is a change of use for one of those units. If there's an issue around the water system, which I might pass to you in a second, I'm not going to the details around. To me, it sounds like it's a matter between neighbors.
Excuse me, Chris.
Oh,
Could you please speak closer to the mic? You're coming in and out.
sure. Sorry. Just lost my thought. Sorry. Oh, if there's more questions, I'm happy to try to answer.
Director Shutter, that answers your question. Any other questions? Anybody willing to make a motion?
Can I move the administrative recommendation? It's in area E.
Area E, Director Federico has made a motion and seconded. Seconded. Any further discussion? This is a rural vote and all in favor. Opposed? Thank you, that passes. And B3, short-term rental accommodation, OCP amendment bylaw, and we are going to break this into 2 votes. And I will refer this to CEO, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to introduce land use bylaw amendment to facilitate the regulation of short-term rental accommodations, vacation rental, bed and breakfast operations uses in the Okanagan electoral areas, with the staff recommendation being the official community plan amendment bylaw 3099-2025 Okanagan Valley zoning amendment bylaw 2800.50 2025 CAO delegation amendment bylaw 3033.02 2025 and development procedure bylaw 2500.36 2025 be read a first and second time, and that the board of directors consider the process as outlined in this report from the chief administrative officer dated August 21st 2025 and be appropriate consideration for the OCP amendment bylaw 3099-2025 for the purpose of section 475 of the Local Government Act, and that in accordance with section 477 of the Local Government Act, the board of directors has considered amendment bylaw 3099-2025 in conjunction with the financial waste management plan, and that the holding of a public hearing be scheduled for the OCP amendment bylaw 3099-2025 and Okanagan Valley zoning amendment bylaw 2800.50 for the regional district board meeting of September 4th, 2025, and that staff give notice of public hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. No PowerPoint presentation, but staff's here to answer questions.
Questions? Director Monteith?
I'll just make the administrative recommendation, please.
Thank you for that. Seconded. Director Federico, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? This is a rural vote. This portion will be rural. All in favor? And opposed? Seeing none opposed, unanimous. The second part of this, that the delegation bylaw 3033.02 2025 be read first and second time. CEO, did you have a comment on this?
Yeah. No comment.
Motion? Seconded? We have a seconder. Any discussion on this? This being a corporate vote? All in favor? Any opposed? And seeing none opposed, passes. Mr. Garish, your face just changed. And we move on to B4, business license regulation bylaw. Again, we'll break this up apart, so it'll be three different votes. The business license regulation bylaw, referred to CAO, please.
And the next one. Thank you. The purpose of this report is to introduce business regulation and licensing requirements in relation to the short-term rental accommodation in electoral area A, D, E, and I, with the recommended motion being that the Regional District of Okanagan will convene business regulation bylaw 3100, 2025 Chief Administrative Office Delegation Amendment bylaw 3033.01, 2025, and municipal ticketing information amendment bylaw 2320.05, 2025 be adopted. Again, no main presentation, but staff's here to answer questions.
Thank you. Question, Director Roberts.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just looking down and I know that I'm in the regulation bylaw around having the ability to have licensing. But again, these other ones, B5 have area G in them. Is that a typo or is that?
Through to staff.
Because I don't have business license, but I have the ability to have business licenses.
Mr. Chair, you are included as part of participant in this service. While you have those regulations, you are still a participant in the service.
Okay, and that's what relates, sorry for the follow-up, B4, B5 are just related to that. Thank you.
Director Taylor.
Yeah, I want to thank staff for all their work. I just want to make sure that I've got everything the way I've got it. So if we can ask you 3 or 4 questions. In area D, you'd have 1 business license and you'd be able to operate both your primary residence one and either secondary or carriage house.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can
Director Taylor, go ahead.
Traditional bed and breakfasts are excluded from
Through
the requirement for a business
the
license.
chair, yes, that's correct. I believe it's under the amendment bylaw that is the next
Okay.
item on the agenda.
Okay, and bear with me, but it's simple for you guys, but it's complex for me, so I'm just asking at the moment. Business license essentially for short-term rentals only,
Yes, that's correct.
and we're down to $200 per fee and $3,000 for fines.
I believe the permit fee was $500 for the short-term accommodation. The $200 fee is in relation to tourist accommodation in Electoral Area E, which is the next amendment bylaw.
Okay. Okay, and I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Any further questions? So this will be a participant vote for areas A, B, D, E, F, G, and I. Does someone make a motion on that? Have a motion and a seconder? Any further discussion on that? All in favor in those areas? And opposed? None opposed. Thank you. So second part of this, amendment bylaw 3033.1, 2025 be adopted. CAO, did you have anything to add here? No. So does anybody want to make that motion? This will be a corporate vote. Motion, seconded? Seconded. And any discussion on this portion? Director Taylor.
Can the CAO give us any idea on implementation time when people would be expected to have business licenses and would be able to go to the counter and submit an application?
Through to staff.
Through the chair, I believe we would be ready to start receiving applications as soon as this bylaw is adopted. There may be a delay. You may be thinking from the previous committee meeting that there may be a delay associated with the land use amendments receiving the public hearing and adoption, but at least for receiving and processing the business license, that would be effective immediately.
Director Taylor, follow.
Okay, and so just because an application has been put in, is it going to, I mean, is the mechanism in place to process them and issue them in a timely manner, whatever that is?
CAO, you have a response?
The mechanism is in place. Software is working. The staff's been trained. So we're not going to have to send somebody back saying we're not ready. Yes.
Director Taylor, follow up.
Thanks very much to staff. I know there's been a struggle, but I appreciate that you've got the work on the next couple of steps already going so that we're not sort of stop, start, stop, start. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Director Bush.
I'm not voting against anything, but I don't understand why the businesses in, same businesses in Cleveland have to pay business license and the ones in Apex don't.
CEO, do you have a response or staff?
Through the chair, I believe that was direction from the board in relation to the business licenses at Apex.
Director Monteith.
Thank you, through the chair. So I wasn't on the board, but I'll share the history, and you might have been on the board at the time. But when the OCP was created, Apex was exempt from business licenses and the requirement for all of that. So to honor what they have already in their OCP, we didn't have the time, honestly, to go out and do public consultation. When the survey went out to the public, it was very confusing about this whole topic. Apex didn't know whether to respond or to not. Some did, some didn't. So honestly, at this point, it's just easier to keep it where it is. It doesn't mean we can't look at it in the future, but right now we did not deal with that properly. So that's why I chose to do the route that I have.
Anything further, Director Bush? Good. Any other questions, comments? Oh, so this is a corporate vote. We need a 2/3 majority. Anybody want to make a motion? Motion's made, seconded. Anybody willing to second? Seconder. Any further discussion on this motion? And all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, unanimous. Okay, and our third portion, again, a corporate vote that municipal ticketing information amendment bylaw number 2328.05 2025 be adopted. Any comment or motion here? Motion's made and seconded. See a second online, Director Federico, thank you. And any discussion? Okay, again, being a corporate vote, all in favor? And any opposed? Seeing none, thank you. Now we move to B5, which we'll have two items on this for the business licensing regulation bylaw, tourist accommodation uses, CAO.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to introduce business license regulations in relations to tourist accommodations uses in Electoral Area E, with the staff recommendation being that the business license regulation amendment bylaw 3100.01 2025 and fees and charges amendment bylaw 3097.02 2025 be read a first, second, and third time, and that the Board of Directors consider the process as outlined in this report from the Chief Administrative Officer dated August 21st, 2025 to be appropriate notification for business license regulation amendment bylaw 3100.01 2025 for the purpose of section 59.2 of the community charter. Staff's here to answer questions.
Are there any questions? This is a participant vote. We're looking for areas A, B, D, E, F, G, and I. I see Director Federico.
I'd like to move the administrative recommendation.
Thank you. And seconder? We have seconder. Any further discussion? All in favor. This is again participant vote, areas A, B, D, E, F, G, and I. And opposed? Thank you. We are unanimous. And part two, fees and charges amendment bylaw number 3097.02 2025 be read first and second and third time. Any discussion or motion? Director Federico, a motion. Thank you. Seconded. Seconded. And Director Federico, did you also want to speak to it? No. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Perfect. Thank you. And we go to C, C1, Sage Mesa water update, and I will refer to the CAO.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just a verbal update on Sage Mesa for the vote that will be taken now sometime early in 2026. But I'll start off with Mr. Fillion, and then the director would have some comments. And finally, I would like to comment on it too. Mr. Fillion?
Chair, just a brief update for me. I know Director Geddens has an update. So public meeting coming up Wednesday, September 10th, 6:30. We encourage everyone to attend. We'll be providing information and available to answer any questions. There's a lot of misinformation out there right now in the community, so hopefully we can correct a lot of that. And then I just wanted to share that Director Gettens has been working very hard, advocating very hard for the residents of Sage Mesa. Staff have been working hard supporting her and also advocating, and we continue to do that. And so it's very much front and center on our plates, and we've had lots of conversations with the province, continue to have conversations and meetings. We'll of course also be at UBCM further advocating. Lots of efforts, challenging times, of course, with the province and finances, but we continue to push hard. And I think with that, I'll let Director Gettens provide an update.
Director Gettens.
Thanks to the chair. So thank you to the staff, and you're right, staff have been working pretty hard on this, and on top of all the other things that they need to do. On Tuesday, the CAO and Mr. Phil and I met with Mr. Bradford, Brian Bradford. He's the executive director of the Local Government of Infrastructure and Finance under the Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs. And as we were talking, and this is his ministry, HMA, we've been talking with Walrus, and we're also going to go meet on September 3rd with the Minister of State, Honorable Anderson, who was here before. His suggestion was that we should also approach the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Health as well, as we're trying to coordinate this, which landed a little softly with me, to be honest, or a little hardly, I guess, with me, because that was been always my request, is to the province coordinate a whole province approach and a solution to this, not us on the local ground trying to get through. So that will be the request when we go to Minister Anderson. I will give her an update of everything we've done between the last time we met with her and now, and I'm hoping that she will help coordinate and provide some logistical support. It's pretty impossible as a very small local government and an even smaller rural director to try and actually get some attention. So I'm pleased so far. We've had about 3 meetings with ministry staff and looking forward to seeing Minister Anderson. We do also have a letter of support from Minister Neal for the regional district's application to the UBCM grant. That doesn't guarantee us anything. It doesn't guarantee us any money, but she just confirms that this is a good idea to have these systems come to local governments, and she's putting her support behind that. So that's great. We also have a letter from the Deputy Ministry of Housing, Municipal Affairs, and Housing and Municipal Affairs, saying that she recognizes my request for logistical and financial support, but there are no funds available within her government either. And then we have an interesting letter that actually went to citizens that was shared with me from the comptroller that we will follow up with. There seems to be a lot of passing a hot potato around for sure. So that is what's going on. We're hoping to meet with, we are meeting with Minister on the 3rd, and we're hoping that she can help us coordinate this. I've got the board letter that we all agreed to do to the Premier, so hopefully maybe that might make some move as well. It has been a very long and frustrating process, as you could probably tell by the tone of my voice. So I am looking forward to the September 10th meeting and having citizens ask questions about this process. Your MLA has been supportive and trying to raise the profile as well with this within her organization, your MP as well. I think they're both will be coming in through a Teams link to that meeting. Again, the staff have invited all the upper ministry staff. I've invited all the ministers. We'll see who shows up, and we'll keep on keeping on. So yeah, thanks.
Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair. I'd just like to take this opportunity to, again, just recognize the hard work that's been happening from Director Gettens, but also from staff, from the CAO. And again, this is a complete and absolute failure of the province. It's their responsibility. It was their system, but it goes across the board in so many of the things that we're dealing with today. Whether or not it's not meeting the obligations and looking after the oversight of improvement or irrigation districts, whether or not it's not, following suit in regards to backing up on private or systems, looking after that, Or even when we were talking about what we're running into, like in my area, the regular time of trying to get them to clean up when we have large dumping issues on Crown land. Again, we see this shell game that's created. You know, and they talk about they don't have any money, but they've created so many different departments that now what used to be, for instance, forestry is now like 4 different things. So if you're looking at trying to address someone, and that's why I'm just bringing that up, is exactly your frustration. I'm having it with, you know, other areas, but also with the water systems in Area G. It's not our responsibility, not my circus, not my monkey, hand you off to somewhere else. And the staff at the regional district and the CAO and the directors are doing all this work, which is taking from us being able to do what we're supposed to be doing. That is an actual jurisdiction of the province. The province has dropped the ball and they just seem to kick it around. And I'm pretty much fed up with it because it does. And again, that's just wanting to say that, but also saying it in support of what you've been dealing with.
Thank you for those comments, CAO.
I also want to add, Director Gettins is working very hard on this along with staff, thinking outside the box. We've actually had some success and some failures talking to the provinces. To the province, one failure was we asked for an interest-free loan. We didn't get it. I was surprised, but we didn't get it. But we also asked for it very recently to be exempted for PST for this project. And hopefully we get that approval, because if we do, there's 2 other services that are out there that were also failed by the province and that we need to take a look at saving funds for them. So the PST, just for Sage Mesa, if it's approved, would save $2.2 million. And it's not money that's coming out of the pockets of the province. It's just money that they wouldn't collect over a 10-year period. That's why the director was asked to go to the finance department. And that's something that we may have to go to UBCM. The other ask, which was a win, we approached MFA and asked if instead of having a 5-year period to borrow the funds, if we can borrow it over 10 years using short term. And by doing that, there is a percentage charge interest difference between short term and long term, which when you're looking at $33 million, it's material. So that's something that we actually got approval, and that we were asked by the director to see if we can push the envelope a little bit more and look at 20 years. I suggest maybe 15. If they accept 10 is good, 15 would be better, 20 would be perfect, but I don't see 20 coming. But we are working hard to try to alleviate the burden for the Sage Mesa residents. In the same time, I'm also thinking of the other services. And just a heads up, I've asked Mr. Filling's department to come back with a utility acquisition policy that looks at different rules. The way that we're doing it, it puts the director on the front line for something that is not necessarily our responsibility. We didn't neglect the utility. However, we're the ones that ultimately have to wear this. And when you're looking up to just under $9,000 now with the new MFA borrowing, that's material. And that 9,000 doesn't kick in until year 10, 11, 12. But it's at the end of the day, a future board's going to have to wear this, and the future director will have to wear it specifically. And why? By then, people will forget that this is not our issue. We're required to fix it, but only if the clients, the 242 clients, agree to join us and agree to borrow ultimately the $33 million. And I do recommend that we don't look at 18.5 million, because that's something that's out there, because that puts a risk on the organization. We would be taking on yet another utility that we don't have the full amount to update the infrastructure. And a lot of municipalities are in that stage where their utilities they don't have the funds in the reserves. So you need grants to reduce the burden. So with that, there should be a utility acquisition policy coming to the board, not next week, we're busy enough, but in the very near future.
Thank you, CAO. I've got Director Bush and then Director Taylor. And I just would also suggest that this is an update before an update before an update. So we don't want to get too deep into this. But again, there's so many moving parts to it that information is important. So let's ask the questions. Director Bush.
So if there's a referendum on this and what are the pros and cons of the people voting for and against?
CEO, do you want to tackle that?
The biggest pro is that they're eligible for grants. Because right now they're not, we have applied for a grant even though we don't own it yet. However, if it's a no, we lose a grant. We will not get it. Even if it's approved, as soon as, if it's a no vote, they lose at up to, I'm not gonna say they get 7 million, but it's up to $7 million. The other areas is if they vote no, then the province has to do the work that we would be doing. However, they don't have to go and ask for a vote. What they'll do is they'll jack up the rates. I don't know if they'll do it as a parcel tax or if they'll do it as more than likely as a user fee, so that if it's a user fee, they cannot defer it in their taxes. So they will collect the money, then do the work, and that will be done by phases.
I do have Director Taylor, but I think this is in response. So if Director Taylor is okay with that, Director Gittins?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to first of all say there's been a lot of discussion how the province will move forward. And I just want to be really clear that we can't speak on behalf of how the province will take this on and if they end up keeping the system. The pros and cons, and I think that's the crux of the issue, to be honest with you, Director Bush, because there has been provincial oversight on this for 35 years. And we've got some things in writing where they purposely didn't invest in infrastructure because they were thinking that was going to be redundant because eventually the regional district will take it over. There are quite a few citizens who are upset with this because of 35 years. And if you have your senior government overwatching your system, you're thinking, trusting that things are happening. So I think that is a good question. So if it comes to the regional district, then we take it as is where is, and the citizens have to agree to that. If it stays with the province, then that becomes then the province's responsibility. Currently, it's the province's responsibility. And I think that's part of the frustration of all this work that we're doing is that we're trying really hard to make this a positive move for the regional district on their responsibility. So when they're not even coming to help us, well, we have this window where it's still their responsibility. And I think that just needs to be recognized. And that's where a lot of frustration is coming from the citizens, is that they're feeling betrayed by the government for a very long time. And I don't blame them. So that's the pros of it. The province is telling us the pros of you taking on our problem is we might give you some money. That's the pro. The other pro, I am going to actually say shout out to the staff. Like the systems that our staff run are run well. They've got great reserves. They don't fail. They're taken care of. This is a good example of what happens if they continue with the province. So like my answer is like this with this.
Thank you, Director Gittins. We got Director Bush, Bloomfield, and Barkwell, and then I would suggest we move along on updates. Director Taylor.
Yeah, just by way of update, I just want to update the board that I'll be putting a notice of motion in that the RDOS act similarly for other water and sewer systems currently within its ownership.
Thank you, Director Taylor. Director Bloomfield.
Thank you, and through the chair, I appreciate the work and that staff are doing and putting in with the province on this, and the feedback and the information on some of the more smaller details, you know, albeit $2 million details, but the smaller details. And I think the larger, we don't want to get caught up in the weeds of the minutiae and lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is that the province are really responsible for a large chunk of this cost, and we should make sure that they are held to that. They have been de facto owners of the system for 30 years, and their negligence has led to the situation that we're in now. The other point is that the infrastructure upgrade requirements, that includes, I believe, most of the infrastructure in the area, in the irrigation district, but does it include the sandstone subdivision? Because the infrastructure in that subdivision is quite recent. And to say that if a requirement is that infrastructure is replaced, then I would say that's rather odd that they would require that. So I'm wondering, can Can staff tell us if that's included or not?
Staff?
Chair, to answer the director's question, the assessment has essentially included all the infrastructure in that area, including sandstone, is my understanding. But again, this is a high-level initial assessment, with a lot of it being based on age of the infrastructure. And again, remembering that it's currently not our system to own. If it comes over to the RDOS, we're certainly going to do our due diligence and do more exploratory work, and any pipes that we have 10, 20, 30 years life left in, we're not going to start replacing those, obviously.
Yeah.
So what we've presented to the public really is the worst case scenario.
Okay, so I'm happy to hear that, I think, because people should know what the worst case scenario is. But the fact is that, you know, the infrastructure in that subdivision, I mean, from an infrastructure point of view, that subdivision is still quite young. And so I'm not sure that replacing that is a logical step, but, you know, maybe a depreciated value on it or some kind of depreciation factored into the numbers might be appropriate. But it certainly, you know, shouldn't hold back on, you know, us demanding that the province be part of the overall, you know, the big picture solution. And it's unfair to go to the users in that system and ask them to vote on an unknown. If we don't know what grants are going to come from the province, then we are asking them to vote on an unknown. We are asking them to put a covenant on those properties for an unknown dollar amount. And I'm not even sure that's legal. If it's going to be a covenant of some kind or an agreement that is put on to those properties, I don't think you can have an open-ended covenant or, you know, or a worst case, and then it can be changed to a better case. You know, and even if it's legal, you know, I don't think it's right. So I'd say that we need to get that direction from the province as to what they're willing to contribute before the vote is made by the users in that system. Thank you.
So we do have a couple of names on the list, Director Barkwell and Roberts, but if it's okay with Director Barkwell, Director Gettins has a reply to that. And again, I would caution that we don't get too into the minutia of this. We're not giving direction. We are simply taking an update. So I think I think once we get to Director Roberts, we'll move on from there.
Yeah, I just have to address that because maybe you should come to the September 10th meeting and share that idea, because this is how we do it. That we have to provide a worst case scenario. The citizens have to know the maximum dollar amount that they could be borrowed. That has been my whole conversation with the province, is give us some money before the referendum. We've gotten to a letter of support for a grant that we may or may not get. That is the whole purpose. It is legal to do this. We do need to tell the citizens the worst case scenario. It would be an error for us to not tell them the worst case scenario and then ask them to go ahead and do that, because then we have a system that we don't have enough money to pay for here. So I trust that the process has been followed and it's legal. It doesn't feel right. What isn't, that part is the correct part, that we give them the worst case, whether we provide citizens with the worst case scenario. What doesn't feel right is that the citizens are in this worst case scenario to no fault of their own because of a provincial oversight. And I want to make that clear. It is a provincial decision over the past 35 years, not the regional district's decision. And that's what is not right. The amount of effort and work that we've been putting in to try and get money ahead of time of the referendum has been met with a resounding no. The last Hail Mary that I've got is with Minister Anderson, which is on September 3rd. So I just want to make that really clear. I don't think that it does our board any good to question the legality of the process that we're doing in our acquisition policy. It is the process that we have, and it is the process. The citizens are not happy with it, but they need to give the worst case scenario. And when we were talking, and the CAO mentioned that MFA and the request to spread it over 20 years, that is a big question about that sea level work that isn't anticipated to start for another 8 years. But we're not at a position where we know if we can do that or not. And it's a decision that we have to come back to bring to this board if we don't get any further. So I just want to say that we're kind of talking, like you were saying, about all over the place. The update is, the next meeting is with Minister Anderson on September 3rd, but there is a lot to unpack here between now and then.
Thank you, Director Barkwell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if this situation is unique. There must be a heck of a lot of small water systems with under the provincial oversight in the province that have been similarly neglected, and how were they dealt with, if we have any info on that.
CEO?
Unfortunately, it's not unique. The only time that we're approached to take over a water system when it gets to this drastic stage. Mr. Fillion could speak more to this than I can.
Yeah, Chair. I mean, certainly the challenge with failing infrastructure is not unique, but the situation with the provincial oversight is somewhat unique. There's only one other system right now in the province. There has been a few others previously that ultimately did end up going over to the local government. But as of right now, there's actually only two of these scenarios.
Good, Director Barkwell. Okay, and Director Roberts.
Yeah, quick question. Does the citizens, or do the citizens lose their right to sue the government if all of a sudden the referendum brings it to the RDOS?
CEO?
That's a question I'll answer in camera. I did obtain a legal opinion, and there's solicitor-client privilege with that.
Thank you. Okay, I think let's move on. We'll go now to item D1, which is Spark BC Accessibility Grant Application. I refer again to the CAO, please.
Thank you, Chair. To improve accessibility for residents, we propose installing an ADA compliant front entry door at the Similkameen Recreation Center. This upgrade will ensure that all individuals, regardless of ability, can easily access recreational, social, and community activities. Accessible entryways remove barriers, foster inclusion, and support greater independence for every member of the community, with the staff recommendation being that the board support an application for the grant funding of $25,000 for the Social Planning Reserve Council of BC to support the installation of accessible doors at the Similkameen Recreation Center, and staff's here to answer questions.
Director Bush?
I would make that motion.
Thank you. Seconded?
Second.
And we have a seconder. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? This is a corporate vote. And any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Item D2, final approval building purchase. Refer to the CAO.
Thank you. It's a long time coming. To facilitate the consolidation of staff offices into one location to improve organizational efficiency and collaboration, we are looking at the possible purchase of 3547 Skaha Lake Road, with the staff recommendation being that the board direct staff to remove contract subject 7, 9, and 10 in the purchase agreement with Primex Skaha Holding Limited for 3547 Skaha Lake Road, Penticton, and that the board authorize the chair and CAO to execute all documentation to complete the purchase of the land and building assets for 3547 Skaha Lake Road, with a closing date of October 15th, 2025, and the possession date of October 16th, 2025. Staff is here to answer questions you may have.
Thank you. That was a move. Okay, and seconded by Director Bush. Any questions or comments? Oh, sorry, CEO.
Staff, there is a PowerPoint that we'd like to show.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the final administrative step in the discussion on acquiring 3547 Skaha Lake Road in Penticton. As the board knows, there's been a contract and several negotiations beginning in April of this year. And there's two phases to the contract. Firstly, there was the suitability assessment that is complete with prior board discussions. And at this stage, electoral approval of the borrowing bylaw and final board approval was also completed in August 7th at the last board meeting. So with that, a brief overview of the contract subjects that were in place. Many of these have already been dealt with. It ranged from city file review, due diligence, environmental assessment, insurance confirmation, initial board approval, estoppel certificates, legal advice, building inspection, lease review, and the property title. So at this stage, we have the three remaining sections or conditions, conditions 7, 9, and 10. And with the termination of the leases, that was the confirmation that the board required that the main lease upstairs was to be provided free and clear. That confirmation has been handed over, as well as electoral approval, which I just mentioned, was provided to the board on August 7th. And at this stage, the board final approval is that last administrative step. So with that, Chair, the recommendation is before the board. I believe the CAO read it out, but it is essentially relating to subjects 7, 9, and 10, and also that the board authorize the Chair and CAO to execute all documentation to complete the purchase of the property at 3547 Skaha Lake Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Having it been moved and seconded already, any comments? Director Taylor.
Again, just wondering if staff can just sort of walk us forward beyond the possession date. There's a number of repairs, et cetera, associated with this purchase. So what's the sort of timeline till you anticipate starting a move in and sale and closing off of current leases? I know that's looking further ahead, but just generally speaking.
Just overview stuff.
Absolutely. Great question. Staff have already started the discussion. There's been a contractor that has been retained to do the assessment, several subcontractors or professionals looking at various components of the building, and they will ultimately be the updated design. The hopes are that some of the major components will be kept to a minimum. We do know, as has been discussion, there's certain elements, including the roof needs to be reskinned, the elevator needs to be assessed. So those projects are underway, and staff are working with the project team. In terms of timing, we're anticipating mid to the latter part of next year, but that does depend on the evolution of the design. So we will keep the board continually updated with the project as it evolves and as we get into the minutiae of the design process.
Follow up, Director Taylor.
Yeah, so just want to make sure that that possibility of extension has been factored into financing. So, you know, if we go 6 months longer, how does that impact us?
Through the CAO?
It has been built into the financing. One of the leases is expiring very soon, so it's actually works well for that. There is another lease, which is important in that the other lease is in where our EOC is at. And it's always made me nervous in that we have our EOC and a lease building. We could be notified that sold and given 6 months notice to leave. So we are, again, the 10 million is worst case scenario. And by having a worst case scenario, I'm always glad to come back to the board and say that it's lower. So we're good.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor. This is a weighted corporate vote. And opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. E1, Parramatta Water and Street Lighting Amendment Bylaws, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. This is to facilitate the development for a fire rescue training facility within the Regional District Parramatta Fire Department. And the recommended motion is that the Parramatta Water System Local Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw 3116/2025 and Parramatta Street Lighting Local Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw 1618.04/2025 be adopted.
Thank you, CAO. Director Federico, did you want to comment?
No, I'd like to move it, please.
And seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? And opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. E2, this is a letter of support for Hudbay Minerals, Inc., CAO.
Thank you. As you stated, Chair, this is to facilitate Hudbay Mineral Inc. request for a timely decision on the provinces regarding the new Idle Bell expansion project or Interbell. And administrative recommendation is that the Board of Directors provide a letter of support addressing the Premier David Abbey and the Minister Hagap Bar, Minister of Mining and Critical Minerals for Hub Minerals, Inc., new Iderbell expansion project for Copper Mountain Mine near Princeton, BC. And staff is here to any questions. This email request came to myself and the corporate officer. So this essentially, it's just a letter of support for the mine.
Thank you. CEO, I see Director Coyne Senior's hand up. Go ahead.
I'd like to move that we do the letter.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We had a seconder. And any comments or questions? Director Monteith.
Thank you through the chair. Where do First Nations sit on this? They typically are not. Yeah, I'm just curious.
Thank you. CEO, do you have any comment?
No, I have no idea where the First Nations, this is just asking a letter of support. So if board would like the letter of support added that contingent on First Nation support, that could be part of the letter.
All right. Let's go Director Coyne Jr.
No, this is a letter of support to get the process moving. It's been going on for years now. We just want to see some movement.
Thank you. Any further comment? Director Bush.
I'm just wondering if I should excuse myself because I have a family member that works there.
Corporate officer.
Mr. Chair, if you feel you would like to excuse yourself, then I would say go with your gut.
Better to err on the side of caution. Director Roberts.
Thank you. And to follow up from Director Coyne, I think this is in regards to the process. Part of the process is dealing with First Nations and all that. It's just getting the ball rolling.
Director Monteith.
Thank you through the chair. I just remember another time we did a letter of support and it kind of came back that, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position of supporting something that may be not supported.
Would agree. Good comment. Personally, I think if this is to initiate process, then the due diligence of that process will incorporate First Nations and any other entity or stakeholder that should be included. But any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we will call the question. This is a corporate vote of the letter of support. All in favor? And opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. We had E3, which was items removed, which we didn't have any items removed. And then CAO report. CAO.
Thank you. A few items very quickly. First of all, I'd like to do just a wildfire response summary regarding the Conifer fire. And it's the Conifer Creek wildfire was reported on August 11th, 2025, east of Highway 3, north of the town of Vesuvius, in response to the fire's proximity to the population areas and communication with the Kelowna Fire Dispatch and the town of Vesuvius leadership and the RDOS were involved. The response actions, BC Wildfire Service and local volunteers, multiple fire departments responded promptly. Oliver Vesuvius Search and Rescue SAR staged personnel nearby to provide evacuation support if required. RDOS and EOC deployed a fire branch coordinator to the incident, as well as an EOC liaison to the town of Vesuvius. So we were supporting them. And I want to thank the town of Vesuvius. I think between I was in the EOC on this case, and between Vesuvius and our EOC, we worked collaboratively and as a team. Task force group was deployed. The EOC was not, it was not a major EOC. There was no major staff time taken away from their daily work, but there was time. So, and I do want to thank the EOC staff that was in there. We have staff pretty well on 24-hour standby that As soon as we get a response, we're there immediately. So if there's any questions on that, that's the first update.
Any questions? Go ahead.
The second one is the Strategic Action Board tracker. As of end of July, if we look at the work promises that we did with the hours from January to end of July, we are 95% completed what we said we were going to complete. So there was a few little hiccups. That 5% will be finished. It just will be finished not at the time schedule that we said. For me, that is very successful. Also, if we look at the whole year from January to December 31st, where there's some projects haven't even started, we are looking at 50%. So it looks like, wow, 50% while we're into the year at 64%, we're not doing very well, but there's projects that will catch up. And so I'm seeing that the 4-day work week that we're looking at still as a pilot is working. And we are keeping close track of the projects that we promised. My goal is to have the carry forwards down to a very immaterial amount. Hopefully, and knock on wood, there's no EOCs that will happen between now and the end of fire season that will delay this. But if there is, we will come back. One of the projections that we're looking at for the ending of August 31st. So if we go from January to August 31st now, we're only 87%, but we still have 2 weeks to take a look at finishing off and going back to that 95%. You all have access to this online, and anyone that needs an update so that you can go back and see where your projects are or where the projects are as a team, let us know, and we will have the staff come and give you an update and a tutor on the project.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so we will move on to, sorry, question, Director Federico. And thank you for catching up.
Yes, thank you to the chair. So I have been chatting with community services about having a change in one of my strategic priorities that I was told was coming to the board today, and it's not on the agenda. So I was just wondering if there's an update, if Mark Koch happens to be in the room, and can give me an update on our library renovation and the change being proposed moving forward.
Thank you for that, Mr. Koch. Looks like he's walking up to give that.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you, Director Federico. Staff's understanding is that the proposed changes are brought forward by the individual board member. So should the board wish to discuss, should the director wish to raise the proposed change, that will certainly be brought through staff for discussion. Of course, there's different hours that are put forward in the strategic tracker, and it'll be weighed against what the anticipated hours would be for any proposed change.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. We've got so
board policy on this is that only the board can add a project, only the board can take something off. There will be something coming back to this board that says if this project is going to be added, this is what needs to come off. And so that is our policy. And what that does is it allows us to maintain our work plan for the total 198 projects that the board wished in the strategic priorities, so that there will be something coming next meeting with that.
Thank you, Director Federico. You want to follow up?
Yes, I'd like to follow up. Thank you, Chair. So I've been back and forth with staff on this on months. I asked a couple of weeks ago for it to come to the board. I'm not adding a project. I simply need to change one of my projects that are on there. So I've been given the runaround for the past 3 months on how to get this to the board. So I'm very frustrated with this because it could potentially mean purchasing a very important parcel in our community. So I need from staff direction on how to get this to the board. And soon, because it's a change in a priority that's they're not adding anything. I don't want to subtract anything. I just want to change in a current priority.
Thank you for that, CAO.
So even if the hours aren't changed, the project's changed. And the board just, it's like a budget where if you authorize $30,000 for one project and all of a sudden the director wants $30,000 for something else, we have to come here and say, we're not doing this project, we're doing that. So from what I'm hearing from this is easy, I think very easy to do. If we can actually do it right now, tell us which project you're coming off and what the library is coming on. So is there a project that we can take off right now?
So I think
Mr. Koch?
Mr. Koch, do you have to
Absolutely. Staff's understanding is that Director Federico is looking to shift the Naramata Library project that's on the strategic priority tracker to a proposed purchase, which would obviously have in-camera components, but I think that captures the essence of the project. So,
But what comes off?
it would be the library project that is my understanding.
So if the board agrees to that, that can happen right now.
I see Director Coyne Jr. with a hand up, but if he's okay with it, I would give Director Federico an ability to reply to that. Okay, Director Federico?
Thank you. So the library right now, we're not really changing the project. My project there is a library renovation. What happened is the roof of the library needs over $200,000 in reno work to bring it up. Like something happened in the roof. So there's an opportunity to purchase another parcel in our community, which is where the library would potentially go. So it's not removing, it's simply just changing the scope of the project from not doing a library reno to now purchasing a parcel. So I'm just looking at how I can get the staff hours moved from project managing a roof replacement to now project managing the purchase or the potential purchase of a parcel. So I don't want to remove or add. I still have the word library in there if that's what's needed to keep this as the set project. Just need to get permission from the board to change the scope from a reno to a possible purchase of a parcel.
CAO reply.
So if the board is good with that, as long as the hours are not increased, then it's not an issue. That could be done right now.
Director Coyne.
I just want to know what Jim wants as the process here. Are we asking for a motion from like a notice of motion? Or are we asking for, is there going to be a point in the board meeting every so often that we're like, is there any changes need to be done? Like, obviously there's some frustration here. I don't know how many other directors might have some of the same frustrations, but I'm hearing a lot of frustration and there's no, I mean, if the director's been asking for months and then this is where we're at right now, how the heck are we supposed to bring it to the board if there's no opportunity, unless it's a notice of motion, which I don't know if that's the appropriate avenue right now.
I wouldn't think it is right now either, but CAO?
We're trying to make this process easy. So yes, it could be notice of motion, but it also could come through me. And Mark Hatch is the one that would be responsible. If you approach Mark and ask for this, and then he would follow up, and it could happen within the following meeting immediately. So in this case, can be done right now, as long as the board approves for the change in the job in the project, then it's an automatic adjusted in the system.
Director Coyne, is your hand still up or is this a new hand?
It's up again.
Okay,
if
go
that's the
ahead.
case, I'll make the motion to proceed.
Okay, so we have a motion to proceed. I suspect Director Federico's hand is up as a second. Okay, and some discussion. I would be cautious that moving forward with what's being described as a name change without any additional detail for the board is sort of a vague vote, but Director Monteith?
Chair, with the purchase, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Through the chair.
Oh,
Thank you. Through the chair. If we're purchasing property, does corporate services need to be involved with a bylaw change and that sort of stuff? So I don't know if there is a bit of a change.
So thank you. I don't know if CAO wants to answer that, but we're starting to get a list. And again, I think having more information probably makes this very, very easy because I don't think it's as simple as a name change to the item. So this could be something that can come back to us at the next meeting with a formal recommendation. But sorry, CAO, you had a response?
Absolutely, Chair. We'll bring this item back for the board for the next meeting and have things detailed in terms of the specific changes that are being requested.
Thank you. So we've got Directors Gilbert, Coyne, and I believe Federico has her hand up as well. So Director Gilbert.
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to. What's the motion on the floor? We just because that's a massive change in scope here, going from repairing a roof to then now we're purchasing a property. I'd like to know what's the actual wording of the motion, because all it was said was, yeah, I'll move that motion, and then it was seconded. what is the motion? Like, let's get a full detail of what this is before we vote on it.
Thank you, Director Gilbert and Director Coyne now.
So in order for this process to go forward, we need a motion to allow the process to go forward. It's not buying a property. It's not doing anything at this point. It's allowing staff to change the scope of the project so it can come back to the board. That's what Jim just said has to happen. So that's what sorry if I'm yelling, there's trucks and stuff. I'm in the park. So that's what's happening here is like, you have to give staff the permission to move forward with a change of scope to bring back to the board. That's what Jim said we have to do. That's what I'm proposing that we do. There needs to be a better process here because this isn't the right way.
CEO, did you have a response, sir?
There is a better way. It's just that it needs to start with the proper staff. And if it starts with the issue that I'm hearing is I think it starts with me until I fine tune the system. And I do have the administrative assistant who's not here today that assists me with this. And between the two of us, this can be very smooth. The objective of doing this is to actually have protection with the staff. It used to be that directors would come to the staff and all of a sudden they have a project that wasn't even on the table without you knowing what's going on. It took away from your priorities because there's a specific priority or urgent matter that came up. This way you control the work. It's a work plan. And going forward, I would ask you to let's go through me and then I will take care of the report that comes to this board. Director Monteith is correct. So the project that we're changing may have affected 5 departments. And we actually estimate how many hours and who is involved in that position. A slight change in the scope or the project might be 3 departments or 10 departments. And that takes away from the ability to do what you decided in your strategic priorities. So what this does is we will come back to you at the next meeting telling you what the original project required for staff hours and the departments, and we'll come back and say, this is the new requirement.
Director Federico, you had your hand up here.
Yes, thank you, the chair. I'm going to keep my frustration at bay here, but this has been going on for months. I have gone to Matt Hatch to talk about how to get the process changed. Jim, I've sent you a number of emails on how to get this process changed. I've had copious amounts of meetings with Mark Koch and Matt Weller on all of this. So we need a plan and a process at this table so we can understand how to move this forward. I have community members who are looking for getting this going. It's significant for our community. And so I just need to know the process. And if this is for today to get this for the next agenda item or on the next agenda, then please let's get that going. But please note that this has been months of chatting with everybody. So I'm a little frustrated that it's coming to the table right now saying that who we need to go to in all this conversation because those have already been had. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So
it's coming to the next board.
So I would suggest we do have a motion on the floor, which I think is already going to be addressed by the CIO. So I'm going to suggest we go through with having the vote. Corporate Officer, you had a comment?
Mr. Chair, so the choices right now for the board are is I can read, I believe that I've caught the gist of the conversation and what the motion may be. So currently there is a motion on the floor. So the choices are the board can go ahead and vote on this, or the mover can withdraw their motion after hearing the direction from the chair or from the CAO, sorry.
So the mover being Director Coyne, I will let you respond, but I would suspect also now that we've hit a point where direction is direction, and with this being on the floor, it puts that direction a little bit more concrete. So unless Director Coyne says otherwise, I'd say we call the vote.
Let's just call the vote.
Director Taylor.
Can someone repeat the motion?
This is, of course, Director Coyne. If I did not quite capture this, please let me know. So what I've got down is that the board directs staff to change the strategic priorities in Area E regarding the library project and a change in scope and return that priority change to the board for approval.
Other than adding at the next meeting, I think that probably captures that. Director Coyne? And Director Taylor, you're good now? Let's call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Anything further, CAO? Oh, Director Coyne.
Yeah, I would just like to ask the CAO to bring us in a timely manner a process in which everybody can follow so that this doesn't happen again, because I'm sure this is going to happen again if we don't have a process.
I think the CAO has
Will do.
acknowledged that. Okay. We now go to G1, Chair's report. Obviously, I'm not the chair. However, I would love to take the opportunity, having been here for the last few days, a week, to just point out Director Kettins and Taylor in the two areas that are crazy with items going on, the amount they're doing, and I know all directors do, but the amount they're doing for their communities should be recognized. And I think from Chair Pendergraft's position, he should also be recognized because the amount of time and effort that's going into this is it's, again, staff as well. It's pretty significant. So all I would report on is kudos to all of you for the hard work you're doing, and I hope your communities are aware of it. So then I would go to G2, which is Director's motions, and there's one from Director Taylor. Do you want to read the motion, Director Taylor?
That staff request that the province add additional funding regarding the incorporation of Okanagan Falls.
CAO, do you have comment?
I do, but I'll save that for in camera.
Okay. So would you like a motion then now, or it'd be hard to talk about it if we've already approved it?
For this part, the motion could go through. It just, the details of what that means would need to be in camera.
So there's a seconder. Do we have any, Director Coyne, you have a question?
I'm just wondering if we could, because we've asked for clarity on our role. I'm just wondering if this is even going to be necessary anymore. So that's my only concern, is if the province does follow what the regional district's role is actually going to be, if we do need more funding or not.
CAO, do you have a comment?
Well, one thing I can share is that because of our role is not defined, we have put a pause on the negotiations between the province and ourselves. And one of the they received this is what they received from us, is I have notified the province, and this is to you that I wanted to talk about. I've notified the province that meetings will not resume that we're having between the province, ourselves, and OIB until the following conditions are addressed by the province: clear definition of the RDOS role in the negotiation process, improved transparency from the province regarding decision-making and expectations, timely provisions of information to RDOS to support meaningful participation. And it says, I personally have notified the Suyas Indian Band. And in the meantime, I asked that staff decline to any further meetings until that is resolved. And I stated this to the province, and I stated to OIB that please note the meeting involves with Tara, which is their administrative ADM. She's canceled a number of meetings, so that actually says to me that we're not as important as we think we should be. But we remain committed to the incorporation process, and we will continue to advocate for a collaborative and informed approach. I will keep all staff and the directors up to date as I receive information regarding incorporation.
Director Taylor, you had something to say?
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at the comments that have been made here by others who've been involved in this process and the CAO, and I'm just wondering if it's not possible to have this motion after the in-camera.
I'll look to the corporate officer. I suggest that I would actually agree, but
The board can make a motion to defer consideration of this motion until following the in-camera meeting.
Director Taylor, that would fit your needs.
I would make that motion to defer till after the in-camera.
Thank you. We have Director Roberts seconding that, and I would suggest on a deferral. There's no debate, so we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so we'll defer that. On my agenda, we now move to board members' verbal updates. And I've got Municipal Finance Authority, which is directors, well, it's Chair Pendergraft and myself, and there was no meeting, so nothing really to report on there, as well as the Insurance Association. Okanagan Basin Water Board, Director Holmes, do you have anything to comment on?
Yeah, a few things. Fortunately, the board has to do more advocacy work. The Canada Water Agency, which was it's a federal agency that was formed in 2023. They have a they have a $600 million fund, which was announced with great fanfare, for conservation and water management projects for what they call national water bodies of note. Unfortunately, neither the Columbia Basin nor the Okanagan Basin are considered a national body of note. In British Columbia, only the Fraser is noted as a national body and is eligible for funding. 65% of the funding for these projects goes to the Great Lakes. So that's another major lobbying effort to get the Columbia added to the list. So good news, a new milfoil harvester is expected to arrive any day now. And that's going to be replacing a 1978 model, which has reached the end of its servable life. So that's good news. And then finally, just the Make Water Work campaign continues. You can take a pledge at makewaterwork.ca if you haven't already. Armstrong is pulling out in the lead. They kind of win it every year, although Oliver isn't far behind. A couple of weeks ago, Oliver and Osoyoos were neck and neck, but Oliver's pulling ahead of Osoyoos. So it'd be nice if the South Okanagan won, and so maybe Director Johansson get your, maybe try and make a little push there. You've got till September 5th to get more of your residents to sign and make a pledge to conserve water.
Director Gittins, you had a question?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I did have a question. That national body of note, is there a criteria? Like a list of criteria?
Director Holmes?
I don't know how they came up with it.
Okay, thanks.
And Director Bush?
Yeah, about the milfoil machine, do we own that or is it the water board?
The water board owns it.
Okay, and who pays? Water board?
Yeah, all of us. The 3 regional districts.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I see one working at Basso too.
Yeah.
Is that an old one? That looks fairly new.
Yeah, I think so they have 2. And so I'm not sure if the one in Basso is the old one or the new one.
It looks pretty new, yeah. Good.
Any other questions for Director Holmes? Moving on to Okanagan Film Commission, Director Coyne? Nothing to Okanagan Regional Library, Director Federico?
Nothing.
Okanagan Kootenai Sterile Insect Release Board, Dr. Bush, Director
new.
Bush.
Nothing new, yeah.
That's reply. And Starling Control, also Director Bush.
Same, nothing new.
Same. And the Economic Trust of the Southern Interior, ETBC, Director Johansson. Do you have anything for there?
No, nothing for there, but I will say, I think the show Tracker is actually filming in Oliver starting in the next week or 2, and they're going to shut down Main Street, and you've got to take anything that identifies, sorry. Anyway, Tracker is filming in Oliver. I'm not sure the exact date, I think in the next week or 2, and we have to remove anything that looks like Oliver. They're taking some of the buildings and making them look like other buildings. But anyway, it's kind of a big event for about 3 days there. So it's just some indication that films are being shot in the South Okanagan.
That's very exciting. Great highlight for Oliver and the region. We're all working together. So I would suggest now we are looking for a motion to go closed, and that we, in accordance with sections 91C, D, I, K, and 92B of the community charter, the board close the meeting to the public. And I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? And then we would give, any opposed? Give Adam a moment to put us in close. Adam, you'll tell me when we're good? Okay, we're good. So we are now back in open meeting, and we will address the deferred motion for vote on additional funds for incorporation. Is everybody aware now that what that motion is? And we need a mover. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Seconder. Do we have any further discussion? No. So all in favor? Any opposed? We had none opposed. So then we would do a call now for any director's notice of motions. Does anybody have any? Director Taylor?
I'd like to make a motion, and I'd also like to ask if the board would consider
dealing with it
voting
today?
on it today. So the notice of the motion would be that the RDOS take similar action for its already owned sewer and water systems as it has to date and will in future for Sage Mesa. So that's my motion.
That's the motion.
And I can speak to it if and when I get a chance.
So would we address dealing with this today first or the motion first?
The board can do at this point is the director's asked if it can be considered today. So the motion would be from the board to waive policy and to consider this notice of motion at this meeting.
So Director Taylor, I assume, would make that. Director Roberts has seconded. So on the motion to deal with this today, any discussion? Director Bush?
So why are we dealing with it today?
Director Taylor, do you want to respond to that?
Because I think there are discussions going on with ministers, et cetera, that the RDOS is part of, and I would hope that they're going to put forward the interests of other systems as well as just the one.
Director Bush? So to deal with it today, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Seeing none, we then move to the motion itself. And I'm sorry, did we have a seconder? Not yet. Director Roberts is seconding. So any discussion, Director Taylor, would you like to speak to it first?
Yeah, I know there's extenuating circumstances for Sage Mesa, and there's only one other system in the province, I guess, that's under a similar administration. But there are extenuating circumstances for many other systems as well, where we can clearly demonstrate that the province has not executed its responsibilities. And as a result of that, the system is in worse shape than it was or would otherwise have been. And so for that reason, and for the mere fact that, like, why wouldn't we be speaking and advocating for systems that are already within our ownership if we've got the ear of the minister? That's why I'm putting this motion forward.
Director Roberts, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you to the chair. And the reason I'm seconding it, it's not only just the ones that we own, it's water systems within our region that a lot of times we know that this is the next step. They're going to want to drop it on us. And it's been where they've dropped the ball themselves. I have one in regards to an improvement district that it's more around the oversight of the improvement district running its water system that's led to a point, and the effects on that water system are all from other ministries, and you can't get any of them to acknowledge, or they acknowledge but defer it to another group, and you just go in circles. And again, it's an importance. We've got other levels of governments that are changing the goalposts in regards to what is acceptable in regards to water, which then all of a sudden puts another bearing of cost on the taxpayer. And it ends up into our bailiwick. It's then something that is way beyond the needs and or the ability for us to manage the finances. And again, it's something that they've changed exteriorly outside of the regional district, and then we end up bearing the cost. So it's, I think this discussion going across water systems, especially within our regional district, is really important.
Thank you. Director Barkwell and then Taylor.
I can't support this because it's just way too vague. I have no idea what it really means and the consequences and such. It's, if you wanted to bring something more specific that we could talk about, and then, you know, then I can see the point, but the way it's worded now is, you know, to deal with it similarly and stuff, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, thank you. Any Director Gittins?
Yeah, thanks to the chair. I wanted to, the work that's been happening right now with Sage Meets the water system is that we have a window of opportunity where the province is still responsible for the system. As soon as that referendum comes, the province no longer has responsibility for the system. It becomes ours. From the very beginning of this, my approach has been to open the door and conversation to allow provincial leadership to come and recognize some of their oversight. It is different than a privately owned system. As we said, there's only 2 of these systems around. The situation is different. And I think the distrust that citizens are feeling towards their provincial government should be addressed by the government. I've said it from the beginning that I don't care who gets the credit. I just want somebody to come and help some money, because this is too much money for these homes for this water system. I recognize there are other water systems that are already within ownership, and I agree that if the regional district staff or this board is leading those discussions, but the reason we're meeting with the minister and the reason we met with the ED and the Walrus was because of me being tenacious and going after it. It's me coming to staff saying, now help me, I've got myself in this situation, I need more information. So kudos to staff, but my intention was never to represent all the systems. It was simply to represent this window before the referendum comes, and then we're just like every other system. So the window's short, I'm using it. I hope the board supports that, but I'm going to continue to do that.
Thank you. Director Shelley, you had a comment?
Yeah, just on the issue of money, all these systems are costing a lot of money. I've got people who are going to be looking at an $11,000 bill annually for the next 25 years. I think that wins the lottery, actually. So yeah, and at the same token, we've demonstrated that the province has not fulfilled its obligation in terms of oversight of the system, and the operators have not done the repairs they're supposed to, and yet they've collected the money, and the money is not present. It's not in a reserve. So where does the oversight come?
Directors Gittins and then Bloomfield.
I get that. I think there's also a group that I'm not sure who's organizing it, but the Clean Waters group of the South Okanagan and that kind of thing. And I will support that, absolutely. But we know we throw recommendations or whatever they're called to UBCM all the time, and we don't hear about them for years and everything like that. So I'm happy to get on board with that larger discussion around provincial oversight in the water systems and access to clean water for the South Okanagan Similkameen. But I will just say that this meeting that I have on September 3rd, it will be about Sage Mesa water. And that's all that it's going to be about, because that's what I've asked her to meet with me about. And that is for the deadline of the September 10th community meeting. But if you want my support for larger, bigger changes, system changes, you will have my support. But this window's tight for Sage Mesa, and I've got to take it while I can.
Director Bloomfield.
Thank you. And yeah, through the chair, this again, it's complicated because, you know, there's different types of ownership of irrigation districts. There's private, there's where the users are determined to be the owners of the irrigation district. And then there's Sage Mesa where the government have stepped in and been in control. So, you know, we're not dealing with the same structure in each irrigation district or water supply, you know, private utility. So the main failing, in my opinion, is that the province has been lax in regulating those systems. They've been lax in governing, in setting up a government structure for them, similar to you would see in a government structure that oversees stratus, for instance. So I think that this is a good motion to take to UBCM for some action throughout the province. We are not alone, as we heard from Minister Anderson when she visited us. They have had numerous requests for help with water systems throughout the province, and so we're not alone. I think it's a UBCM issue more than a regional district issue, and so I think, you know, fully support it going to UBCM, but not sure I'd be willing to support us putting the same energy into the other systems that is gone into Sage Mesa at this point. I think that the other systems have received a lot of attention as well, but as Director Getton said, Sage Mesa, they have a window of opportunity right now.
Thank you. Director Roberts.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I don't take that lightly in regards to what's going on with Sage Mesa. I think that's almost separate. I'm just thinking and saw that the motion from Director Taylor was more about us, not necessarily, because it won't be the same. You know, the effort that's going into Sage Mesa right now and having the window of opportunity is very directed. But at the same time, we don't want to lose sight that we need to keep that messaging going that is similar to Sage Mesa, and as Director Bloomfield was stating, to the UBCM. And that's kind of where I want to see this, the similarity between Sage Mesa and all these things. It's, again, it comes right back to it's the province, and we got to keep hammering that message through to them about their responsibility and their dropping of the ball. But again, I wouldn't want that to take away from the window of opportunity and the hard work that was and is being done with Sage Mesa.
Dr. Barkwell.
Could we have the motion read again?
Mr. Chair, the motion on the floor is that the RDOS Act similarly for its already owned sewer water systems as it has to date and will in the future for Sage Mesa.
So seeing that we are, so I won't be supporting this either. I think it's probably a larger picture item. And I think we've identified each area is actually unique. So to say similarly is too gray of an area for me. But having said that, I also know I don't want to rush through anything, but we do have a delegation and we're a touch behind. So if we don't have further new comment, I would rather we call the question here. So on the motion itself, all in favor? And opposed? Is Directors Bush, Roberts, Johansson, Watt, Gettins, Bloomfield, Wiebe, Barkwell, Coyne, Cherwal, Rodrigo, Gilbert, and Rainin. Yes? That was good. Okay, so I don't believe we have further business here. If I'm right on that, CO, then we would make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 11:49. Director Bush, seconded. Director Bloomfield, all in favor? Thank you. We shall move, I suspect we will try, if we can, to move directly into our next corporate services item, which is so we call this meeting to order at 11:50. And I would ask a motion to adopt the agenda. Director Roberts, seconded. Director Holmes, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we have no, we're still good. We have a delegation. We have Danielle Hubbard from the Okanagan Regional Library Board. CAO, did you want to speak first?
You pretty well said what I was going to say.
Thank you. And Ms. Hubbard, thank you very much for being here today. And we will let the floor be yours.
Thank you. The audio is working. Okay. Thank you so much for making time for me. I can tell you have a really busy meeting, so I will take 10 minutes of your time. So as was said, my name is Danielle Hubbard. I'm the CEO of the Okanagan Regional Library. And I did submit a PowerPoint ahead of time. I don't know.
Adam, do you have that?
If it's going to be awesome. Okay, I'll just finish my introduction while it gets loaded. So several of you have already heard a variation of this presentation because I've been visiting all of the councils in our service area, but I really want to make sure that the regional district boards also are aware of the services that the Okanagan Regional Library provides. So I came out here last year, about a year ago, and at that point I did quite an introductory presentation where I talked about who I am and how the ORL, as we call ourselves, is structured. So I won't repeat all of that. I'll just sort of give one reminder that we're one of the largest library systems in BC. We cover 4 regional districts, so the RDOS is our most southern district, and then we go up through Central Okanagan, North Okanagan, and Columbia Shuswap. But we don't provide service to either Penticton or Area H surrounding Princeton. So there's a few anomalies throughout our system, but in general, that's who we are. So I'm just going to highlight 5 of the areas of service that the ORL provides that I think highlight the benefit and relevance of having a public library in your community. Sorry, I'm just wondering where should I point this magical device to make?
Adam?
Click it at you. Next slide, please. Oh, one slide back, please. Thanks so much. Okay, sorry about that. So the first initiative I wanted to highlight is Summer Reading Club, which is in its final weeks right now. So it's our busiest time of year in July and August. Kids can come into any one of our 30 branches. They sign up for a reading record, they keep track of how much time they're spending reading, and then when they hit certain milestones, they get prizes and incentives. So it helps combat the reading slump that sometimes happens over the summer. And if you go on to the next slide, thank you. These are some stats from 2024 because this year we're still halfway through the program. So these all show areas of growth. And actually, I think this is quite similar with public libraries all across BC. So last year, 2024, we saw a 35% increase in participation in the program since COVID. So during COVID, there was a bit of a slump, but we're now exceeding the participation levels from the pre-COVID years. And last year, over 8,000 kids registered and just under 29,000 kids and parents came out to programs. So we always have a system-wide presenter or two who come around to all 30 of our branches, as well as our branch level staff do a lot of work developing their own story times and programs. If you move on to the next slide. The second service area I wanted to speak to is electronic resources. So of course, when you think of public libraries, you think of books because we have hundreds and thousands of those that travel up and down our region. But we also have an increasing array of e-resources too. So books and ebooks and audiobooks that people can borrow from their devices wherever they're located. And if you go to the next slide, again, I have some highlight stats. So these are again from 2024. So in 2024, just under 800,000 ebooks were borrowed and circulated. So that was an 8.6% increase from the year before. And then audiobooks, so ones that people can listen to, were just under 500,000. And that was a 23% increase. So probably no surprise to anyone, but people are reading and intaking information in a slightly different way than we used to. And the library provides access to that as well. And then digital magazines and newspapers saw the highest level of increase at 61%. And I think that's because we've really added a number of resources like consumer reports that used to be printed out physically and are more and more moving online and need digital passwords and access that the library provides. Next slide. Third area I want to highlight is our Library of Things collection. So this is a new collection we introduced recently that's physical objects that people can borrow and take home and use and then return to the library. So some of the pictures shown on the screen here, we have a radon detection kit, a whole array of robotics and STEAM learning kits. There's an outdoor play kit. And then if you go to the next slide, I have a show and tell. So we have 22 unique kits in the system. Our whole collection travels up and down, so people can place holds on any of our items and they arrive at your local branch. So the kit I have here is a Braille Lego kit, one of our newer collections. So it comes with a key that's a little bent because I've been traveling around with it for the past 4 months. So it shows all the different letters in the Braille alphabet, which each letter is a different configuration of 6 dots, which works very well with a standard Lego rectangle. So the kit contains 6 Lego rectangle sets that have all the different letters in the Braille alphabet and a ground sheet people can arrange different words and letters on to practice. And then my favorite part of the kit, because it amuses me, is a muffin tin with 6 tennis balls in it, which is actually a learning aid that people use when they're practicing Braille because it's so much easier to feel 6 tennis balls than 6 tiny dots on a piece of Lego. So that's just one example of one of the kits we have. And last year they circulated just under 2,000 times. And if you go on to the next slide. Thank you. So this is an area we're still working on, as I'm sure all of you can relate. Climate change is really impacting our service area. So public libraries play an active role as areas of refuge for people. So we're heated centers, we're cooled centers, we're open to the public. One of my goals as CEO is to have our branches, especially in rural areas, open more hours. It's a really kind of a slow process, but we're figuring it out. Because in many of our smaller communities, the library might be the only free open place for people to gather. And if you go to the next slide, it's not particularly informative. It just reminds me what to talk about. So 4 of our branches are official heating and cooling centers. So if there's a heat dome or a cold snap, then we work with our local governments to stay open additional hours. And right now I'm working with my board to develop clearer policies around that to make it easier for us to extend that service to other communities that are interested and do it in a consistent way throughout our system. And then next slide. So I was just sitting, of course, through your discussion about the province and local government, and that's a conversation that happens in library land all the time as well, because about 95% of our funding comes from local governments, from municipal tax levies. So part of why I come out and visit all of our district boards and councils each year is really to thank you all for your support of the library. Our rate of provincial funding was frozen in 2012. So the province's support for public libraries, which means, of course, that every year local governments are paying a higher percentage. So this year, several of my board members and I are going to UBCM to try to advocate for greater consideration from the province for more funding. And I know some of you in this room have been involved in that. But one positive thing is that a couple of years ago, the province did contribute a one-time additional chunk of funding to every library system in BC. And so one of my priorities as CEO was to make sure that that funding got out to each one of our 30 branches and really benefited those branches. So for instance, within the RDOS, Naramata is undergoing a renovation right now this week. They're getting a new circulation desk, new flooring, new paint on the walls. We've been really actively working with RDOS staff to figure out a new home for that branch because it's kind of end of life, but at least we're giving it a facelift in its current home. thanks in part to this funding. Caledon's getting a new circulation desk soon. OK Falls was recently painted and got new flooring. So those kinds of improvements are happening throughout the system last year and this year, which I think is really exciting, especially for our staff who have worked in those communities a long time and been wanting something better for their locations. So that's really important to me. I think I'm going to leave my presentation at that, but if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have Director Bush and then Robert.
Thanks, Danielle. Care Miss years ago was cut back with budget reasons. And like you said, I like to concur what you said about the rural libraries. Hopefully there'll be more funding move forward for us in the future so we can get the library back to regular hours.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to that. So I've been CEO for just under 3 years, and that's correct. In about 2013, then a different funding structure was put in place that resulted in a number of our branches having reduced hours, including Caramias. So one of my goals as CEO, we'll see what's possible. But I do want to build those open hours up again because I think it's been hard on a lot of communities. Yeah.
Very good. Director Roberts.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. As a follow-up to Director Bush's discussion, and I'm Area G and got the little hamlet or village of Headley.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether or not, especially, tying into getting more provincial support, has there been any investigations, for instance, to having BC services kiosks as, co-opting with the ORL and some of their, especially their rural and remote facilities? So because a lot of the same time, those communities look at you for cooling and warmth, but information, and it's one of the things with the amount of people on lower income and fixed incomes that live in these tiny communities aren't able to access services. It might be something that cooperatively you might be able to garner more funds from the province.
The quick answer to that is no, we hadn't looked into that possibility, but since you mentioned it, I'm happy to. Yeah, I think it's true that especially in tiny little places like Headley is actually the smallest community that we have a branch in. Yeah, the library can be a bit of a catch-all for whatever people need. So I think that's a really good suggestion. Sorry, my current answer is no.
Thank you. I have a question from Director Bloomfield.
Yeah, thank you. And you talked about the renovations on buildings and so on. Do you own all the buildings that you operate out of?
No, we own 5 of our facilities, and then the other 25, I guess it can't be split halfway because that wouldn't make sense. Approximately half of them we lease from local governments, and approximately half of them we lease from private landlords. Yeah.
Any other questions? No. Thank you so much for your time and your presentation, Ms. Hubbard. Very informative and great to have you. Thank you. Moving on to B2, another delegation, we have Mr. Nielsen. Mr. Nielsen's coming, I believe, to give us an overview of his findings from his interviews that he had with each of us. CAO, did you have something to add?
Just that this is one of the board's strategic priorities. So in the strategic priorities outline, it was originally scheduled to, if the board agrees to this, for a 6-month trial. Just so that's all I really want to add.
Thank you. Mr. Nielsen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Watt, and thank you, board members, for having me here today. I'm just going to put my slides up here that I can take you through a little bit of a presentation. There we are. Wonderful. Thank you, Vice Chair. As Mr. Safino mentioned, I was asked to undertake a review of the board's committee structure, and that was coming out of the board's strategic priority. It was also something that was raised in a number of other contexts, including the organization efficiency review. Let me There we go. Some of the questions that have been raised, I think, as part of the discussion leading up to the review, questions such as, should all committees be committees of the whole? Why is there no Electoral Area Services Committee? We'll talk about this as we go through the slides. And is the current structure best for the board, and do directors support that structure? As I mentioned, I was asked to review the different structure, and really I set out to ask and to address a couple of questions. One is, do current committees contribute effectively to board decision-making? When we think about decision-making at the regional district, as all directors in the board here will know, the board of directors is the governing body for the regional district. The governing body has a responsibility to once in a while review its structure to ensure that it is making decisions in an effective way, but also where it can be efficient in an efficient way. When we're dealing with democratic government, we never want to stress efficiency too much because we always want to leave room for rigorous debate and for all views to come to the table, and that does take time. That said, there's always opportunities to find ways to organize ourselves as a board so that we can move decisions quickly and we can streamline certain agendas and put other types of issues into different forums for some discussion. So, do current committees contribute effectively to board decision-making? Is the current list of committees the best list? Are there any gaps in those committees? Are there any redundancies that we should be concerned about? And would there be value in establishing an Electoral Area Services Committee? So those were the three questions I really set out to identify. I looked at the current structure in some detail. I looked at the terms of reference, which are all in the board policy manual. I looked at agenda topics from the different committees over the last 3 years to get a sense as to how committees were being used and the type of issues that went to committees, and looked at some recommendations and looked at some other items as well, and a fair bit of comparative research too. I did reach out to all directors for interviews, and I was able to connect with the majority of directors for sure, and connected with certain staff, including Ms. Batten and her staff in corporate services or legislative services, which of course is the main body within the organization that is responsible for helping the board to manage its processes and its governance structure. Comparative research undertaken and focused on regional districts with large numbers of jurisdictions, including large numbers of electoral areas. So those types of jurisdictions, those types of regional districts would be regional districts such as the Fraser Valley Regional District, Regional District of Nanaimo, Fraser Fort George, Kootenay Boundary, Central Kootenay, those kinds of regional districts that have large numbers of electoral areas, but also a decent number of municipal jurisdictions too. I did finish the consultations last week. My last interviews were with directors last Monday, so thank you very much, directors. There were a few that we were unable to get together, and I'm always happy to supplement what has been done with further discussions and research completed last week as well. And the idea today, Vice Chair, is to present the findings and some proposed changes, and then follow up following the discussion that we have today with a report coming to the board at its next meeting or the subsequent meeting, depending on what works for the board. The current structure, just to identify and outline this briefly for directors, and everybody here will be familiar with the structure, but just to get us all on the same page, as it were, start off with a little description of our current committee structure here at RDOS. A unique structure of board committees, for sure, when we look at other regional districts around the province. We here have 5 advisory committees, and they're established to assist the board in decision-making, as all committees are. They're advisory committees in that sense, and most committees, when we look at regional districts, while they can have certain amounts of delegated decision-making authority, most committees are advisory in nature. Certainly standing committees, select committees, they're designed to provide forums for discussion to occur, to bring issues to different groups of directors and jurisdictions that are most responsible for those issues, to look carefully at those issues and to provide recommendations or advice back to the board. Our committees are no different in that respect. The committees that we have in place were established really to align with what was the corporate organizational structure at the time. So we look at our 5 different committees that are in place, and we see that there's a great connection to the main divisions or departments of the regional district at the time. We see that sets us apart a little bit from most other regional districts, which may identify committees and assign those committees based on priorities of the board at any particular time. So those committees may change with boards, with successive boards. Looking at board roles. So for example, when we think of the roles of the regional district, we think that it is a regional governing body. So there are kind of region-wide issues. It's also a local government for electoral areas. And so there'll be local issues. And we see across regional districts, some regional districts will create committees to align with those different roles. Other regional districts will look at different types of services and capture those services in different types of committees. Ours, again, being a little bit unique in that we've structured it based on what was a corporate organizational structure. Our committees are also unique in that they're select committees as opposed to standing committees. And when we look at the Local Government Act, we see some distinctions between those two types of committees. They're both advisory in nature. Standing committees, however, are permanent in nature. They're created at the prerogative of and by the chair of the board to determine, or as vehicles or as forums in which issues are discussed, issues of a particular policy nature, a policy area, service area, or type are discussed. And those committees, being permanent committees, tend to go on until they are brought to a close by a change on the board or a change by the chair. Select committees are different. Select committees are created by the full board, not by the chair. They tend to be time limited in nature. They are typically struck in order to deal with a specific issue or particular set of issues. Once those issues have been studied, recommendations have been made, select committees tend to be disbanded. So ours are a little bit different in that we have created them as select committees. They function, however, more as standing committees. Every committee in our regional district, and this perhaps I think is the point that makes it most unique as a structure, is a committee of the whole. So our committees are full committees of the board. We don't typically see that across regional districts. That's not necessarily good nor bad, but it is just a feature of ours that doesn't exist in most places. I will say that many places do have a committee of the whole. So they just don't have every committee as a committee of the whole. As you mentioned, Vice Chair, I did have an opportunity to connect with the majority of directors around the table and online, and just picking out individual themes, common themes from my consultations, we can see that some directors support elements of the current structure. And so, for example, I heard from a number of directors the view that having committees of the whole is inclusive and it supports the ethic of one reason, or the ethos of one region, which is part of our logo. It's also part of the spirit here at RDOS. So one region supported by the idea of committee of the whole with all directors on every committee. I heard from some directors that the inability to provide input on all matters, I beg your pardon, the ability to provide input on all matters, including those matters on which a director or a jurisdiction may not have a particular vote, but that ability to contribute to the discussion of every matter is perceived by some to be a benefit to everybody. This comment arose particularly in relation to reviews of land use planning matters and development matters by electoral area directors who have the vote and who only have the vote, or the only ones who have the vote as it relates to development approvals in local areas, in electoral areas. There was a number of electoral area directors and others who felt that it was useful to have the perspectives of the municipalities, the municipal directors at the table and contributing to those discussions. Some directors suggested that there's no real problem to fix, so leave well and good enough alone. There's other issues that we can deal with. Our governance structure is good the way it operates right now. Some directors noted that change could be risky, a little bit, be careful what you wish for, and it's not necessary. And that goes back perhaps to the previous point. And then finally, an absence of an electoral area services committee promotes a faster turnaround time, or faster turnaround times related to development approvals, and also promotes the ethos of one region. When we think about turnaround times, the comment there relates to the idea that when a planning application or development application comes to the regional district, if it were to go to an electoral area services committee first, and that electoral area services committee then made a recommendation to the board, that time lag of a couple of weeks would slow things down unnecessarily. Now, on the other side of the coin, Vice Chair, we saw that there were several directors expressed some criticism or some concerns about the existing system. And I'll talk about some of the key themes in here. First is that not certain if 5 separate committees of the whole are required. Right now, we've got 5 different committees of the whole. Issues are identified by committee. They're sent to those committees. The chair changes those committees. They are back-to-back meetings and so forth, but the idea that we don't need 5, we could go with 1 committee of the whole to deal with all of these different topics that are there, particularly if other changes are made to reduce the number of topics or to assign topics to different committees. Several directors noted that there are the presence of the current committee structure with committees of the whole can contribute to delays in decision making. The idea that there is some duplication and some ping-ponging of issues that go from the board to committee back to the board, and the short-term rentals was identified as a key example of such an issue. So some concern around that, some concern also around the idea that electoral area directors, which constitute a special group here in the regional district, and which also are electoral area directors also not having their own councils, not having their own governing bodies outside of the regional district to meet with, to build team with, to discuss issues with in an informal and a formal way, that having no forum in which to come together to discuss issues that are unique to rural areas and that are important to rural areas, the needs and the services, is problematic. On a similar note, concerns around the involvement of municipal directors in planning and electoral area services discussions, over which they have no decision-making authority and no role in some of those decisions. Even when some of these matters come to the board for decisions, it is still the stakeholders, the electoral area directors, who are decision makers there. Not all decisions, of course. When we look at budgets or establishing bylaws, then we're looking at more corporate votes or weighted corporate votes, but on many issues, they are many issues identified or voted on simply by the electoral area directors. There is just on this note, as a small aside, there is a counter view to this. The main view being that jurisdictions that contribute to, that are participating in a service, are the jurisdictions whose directors should have the say over those jurisdictions, over those matters, and who should have the legitimacy or the right to participate in discussions of those issues. The counter issue there, or the counter view, is that everybody sitting around the board table, irrespective of whether they are representing a jurisdiction that is part of a particular service, has a right and in some views, an obligation to be able to participate in discussions involving services of the regional district, irrespective of the list of participants on in those services. So 2 different views, both legitimate. The prevailing view, though, certainly in talking with directors, is that perhaps there's an argument for electoral area directors to be able to focus on the services over which they have decision-making authority, exclusive decision-making authority. Finally, a concern that was raised by a few people, a few directors, was that the structure doesn't reflect the subregions. We've got 2 distinctive subregions here in RDOS, the Okanagan Valley, the Similkameen Valley. Our committee structure doesn't reflect any differences between those 2 different subregions. And perhaps it does that by design to create that one region approach. Nevertheless, for some folks, that would seem to be problematic because it doesn't look at the specifics and the specific needs of different subregions. When we look at the committees that we currently have in place, our 5 committees of the whole, and we go back 3 years and we look at the types of agendas and the types of issues that have gone to the different committees and the activities of the committees, how active they've been, how often they've met, how many recommendations they've made, and so forth, we can see that planning and development is the most significant in terms of the meetings held and in terms of the recommendations made. And that's not surprising because we see that the number of issues and the range of issues that go to planning and development committee is quite broad. And so some being regional in nature, many being local in nature. We also note that this committee does not actually deal with land use planning applications. Those go directly to the board. Corporate Services, Environment and Infrastructure, those 2 committees of the whole are the next most active in terms of, or have been the next most active in terms of numbers of meetings, numbers of recommendations. The other 2 committees of the whole, not terribly active relative to these 3. Let's look at other places briefly here. And this is by no means an exhaustive presentation of the differences and the similarities between Regional District Okanagan, Similkameen, and other regional districts, but just to pick up on a few key points. The first is that select committees are not common, or where they are used, they tend to be used more as task forces or more specific time-sensitive committees that are put in place to address a specific issue and then disbanded. And that's the intention behind select committees, and that's why the boards as a whole will tend to create those. Standing committees are definitely more preferred, and because one of the responsibilities of the board chair is to ensure that a governance structure is in place that provides for effective and efficient decision-making by the board. And we see, by the way, the same power at the municipal level for mayors. So in every one of your municipalities, the mayor has the prerogative and the obligation to put in place the different standing committees. Committees of the whole do exist. As I mentioned, most regional districts have a committee of the whole, as do many municipalities. They're not common, however, or it is not common to have only committees of the whole. So there are very few places, if any, other than RDOS that just have committees of the whole. Committees do exist in several places to address specific areas of service and policy. So it's not that we don't have different committees assigned to different areas of service and policy. It's just we don't see those committees as being composed of all directors of the board. When we look around regional districts, we tend to see different committees with subsets of directors. And again, they all report back to the board with recommendations. And so the full board has an opportunity to review the issues. They're studied, and recommendations are made on those issues, however, typically by a subset of directors brought back for consideration by the full board. When we look at some regional districts, so for example, Nanaimo, Kootenay Boundary, East Kootenay, Central Kootenay, those regional districts do recognize the subregions of the committees. Those are regional districts similar in some respects to RDOS that have distinctive subregions. And then finally, several regional districts feature electoral area services committees to handle local planning and development applications, to handle different types of services, to be forums in which local electoral area directors can meet to discuss issues that are important to rural jurisdictions. Also, that are bodies that can advocate or propose or recommend different positions, advocacy positions that the full board then can take to the province. And so there's a whole range of different functions, different activities that the electoral area services committees do in other places to serve as those forums for electoral area directors. Some suggested thoughts going forward for RDOS is the first is for the board to consider. And I do say the board here because right now you've got a situation in place where you've got your 5 select committees. So we would want to have the board's endorsement for any changes to move away from that system. And because those were created by the board, we need to have the board to uncreate them if that's what the board chooses to do. Whether they are created then by through a more typical process of under the chair's authority would be something for the chair and for the board to consider. But the RDOS going forward, the first suggestion is for the RDOS to consider an electoral area services committee. And that committee would look at a number of different items. It would there would really be 4 different categories of things that it would look at. One would be services, so local area planning matters, for example, the applications under land use planning or under electoral area planning, parks, local infrastructure and utilities, so local parks and recreation, bylaw enforcement, fire protection, and emergency preparedness, grants and aid, those kinds of things. All of those types of services that are exclusive to either a few or to all electoral areas would go to this committee for deliberation, for study, for recommendations to be made to the full board. Looking at also another area that would be budgets. So budgets for electoral area services. Those automatically, of course, come back to the board, but looking at budgets for those specific services. Advocacy would be another topic of discussion or area of focus for the Electoral Area Services Committee, or could be at least, looking at issues that are important to rural areas and coming up with recommended positions that would go back to the board for endorsement or for discussion and ultimate endorsement before moving into other forums for advocacy. And then finally, delegations. So your electoral area services committee could be the body that receives delegations, such as your Parks and Recreation commissions, your advisory planning commissions, other committees and other groups that want to make presentations that on rural issues and on other issues that are important specifically to electoral areas. I've got some so provincial programs that target rural areas and so forth. It would also serve as a forum for raising and discussing rural issues and concerns. And we see that very explicitly in many of the terms of reference for the electoral area services committees around the province. We would want to build out definitive proposed terms of reference, and how we designed the committee through its terms of reference would be very important, because there are some concerns that we can preempt or address through the development of terms of reference. For example, how do we deal with very time-sensitive development applications? Well, there's a process that we can put in place and put into the terms and put in the procedure bylaw for the RDOS, which says that at the prerogative of the CAO or at the prerogative of the chair, these issues can go directly through to the board and not go to ASC in some cases. We can also identify other issues that, while they may be specific to electoral areas in some senses, have implications for the broader region. And so we want to identify those issues through our terms of reference to go directly to the board. So we can be very careful in how we structure these types of terms of reference and the mandate of this committee. So build out definitive proposed terms of reference. Voting membership would be limited to electoral area directors because it's an electoral area services committee. However, just as with all of your committees and with committees of every other regional district, any member of the board would be able to participate at the table in an ex officio non-voting capacity. We also note that as for many of the decisions made by the many of the recommendations put forward by the Electoral Area Services Committee could go to the board, and this is where some of the board agenda management benefits and where some of the streamlining of the decision-making occurs, could go to the board on consent agenda. Provisions can be put in place, however, to really filter and really identify what it is that should go through on consent. So, for example, one provision you could say is that there has to be unanimity among electoral area directors to put things in consent. And there's always the recognition that any director of the board can pull it out of consent for a broader discussion at the time. As I mentioned, the EASC, or the Services Committee, would make recommendations to the board on all matters that required board approval, and voting at the board then, just as it does today, would occur as per the voting rules. So there would be a lot of stakeholder-weighted votes, there would be a lot of corporate-weighted votes, and some corporate votes or unweighted votes. Matters that are voted on only by electoral area directors would go to the board as a consent agenda, or again, there could be caveats put in there to require unanimity on the part of the electoral area directors in order for something to go on a consent agenda. And as I mentioned, every director would have the prerogative to remove something from consent to look at it more carefully. I've also suggested, in addition to thinking about, or in addition to creating an electoral area services committee, consider streamlining the existing committees into a single committee of whole. So, and I'll show what this looks like in a moment then. If we've got our 5 committees of the whole at present, with the addition of an electoral area service committee, a good portion of the items that currently go to the different committees would go to the electoral area services committee, in addition to the items that are now more from a planning and development approvals perspective would go from the board into first the electoral area services committee. That would provide an opportunity to streamline the numbers of committees and to look at creating one committee of the whole, where you've got the entire board there, all directors there, to deal with regional issues and issues of importance to the broader regional district or the regional community. These issues would be the issues by default that would not go to the Electoral Area Services Committee. We see that all regional services and sub-regional service matters would go to this committee. Delegations on issues of importance to the broader region or to the corporation would go to this committee. The range of topics that are currently addressed under our existing committees would be captured by this single committee of the whole. And I noted that most of the local area issues would be sent to the Electoral Area Services Committee. This structure, by the way, is used in a couple of regional districts. So when we look at the Fraser Valley Regional District, they do have 2 committees in place. And I've looked at that one as a possible model for RDOS to test. They have an electoral area services committee and they have a regional services committee, they call it. The regional services committee is one that deals with the regional service matters. The difference with FVRD is their regional services committee is not committee of the whole. I'm suggesting that the regional services committee or the single committee of the whole be a committee of the whole. Our current structure this is the governance structure, not the organization structure, but would be our board of directors as the governing body. And then we've got our 5 separate committees of the whole under there. Under the new proposed structure, we would have the governing body, of course, and we would have the committee of the whole for regional and corporate matters, and we would have electoral area services committee for electoral area matters. Just a final note here prior to inviting discussion, Vice Chair, is that deals with logistical and other matters that would need to be determined. And so there's, as I mentioned, there are going to be some very legitimate questions and concerns that directors may have with respect to this kind of structure. All of those concerns can be addressed through a careful construction of the committees and careful terms of reference to manage how information flows and where it goes to and how recommendations are made and who gets to be part of those recommendations. So in terms of logistical and other matters, we've currently got our 2 board meetings every month. So when we look at scheduling of meetings and so forth, we've got our committee of the whole follows the board. We want to determine where do we put in our electoral area services committee? Do they go on the same day as the board? Do we have 2 per month? Do we have 1 per month? That's something that I would want to work with staff to understand, kind of anticipate the kind of volume and the kind of need for having those perhaps 2 meetings versus 1 meeting. We would want to have policy and procedure on what and when to send directly to the board in place of going to the electoral area services committee, because there may be some, I anticipate there would be some topics that would go directly to the board instead of to the committee, even though they may be committee topics that are more related to rural areas. We would want to have new terms of reference to bring back to the board and make sure there was comfort around those. And we would want to ensure that their staff are assigned to the committees. That would be something for your chief administrative officer to worry about. We would also want to consider not having them as select committees, but more as standing committees under the board chair authority in keeping with the system in every other regional district. The sub-regional aspect is, I think, a very legitimate concern that has been raised by some of the directors in my discussions with them. We do have 2 distinctive sub-regions. We have some concerns on the part of other directors as to about the potential for separate sub-regional based committees to undermine the one region approach. I'm very sensitive to that concern. I also note that when we do have sub-regional committees in other regional districts, we tend to see them created to deal with a number of sub-regional services. So we've got we have relatively few sub-regional services compared to the number in other jurisdictions in other regional districts where they create different sub-regional committees. So what I've suggested is that look at that as a possible future phase once first changes are made to see if there is then the potential for and the need for a sub-regional committee. And if the concerns around the separation of the sub-regions by committee can be addressed satisfactorily for the board. And then as Mr. Safino mentioned, the idea was to look at this type of change for a 6-month trial period. And Vice Chair, I will end there.
Perfect timing. Director Roberts stuck his hand right up.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Again, I just see the 6 months. It seems like all the other times we've had these trials, we say 6 months, and then 6 months is never really enough. Well, why don't we do it for a year? I'm just wondering about that. Is that a usual timeline, like 6 months versus a year? Because we ran into the same thing, I think, for our 4-day and a couple other things. So anyways, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and through Vice Chair to Director Roberts. I think it's a really good question. I think initially I was thinking 1 year, but I know that the board and the strategic plan had talked about 6 months, and so my own personal view is 1 year may give you a little bit more of a robust data set, if you will, to really test it. But I think 6 months is not, it would not necessarily be inadequate. I think you could do it over 6 months, but it might just be a lot of changing. So it's a very good question you raise.
Thank you. Director Barkwell.
Thank you, Chair. Got a couple of questions, I guess. What's the advantage of having even one committee of the whole. I mean, I can see an electoral area service committee, but then why not all the things that would be in the other committee of the whole just be part of the regular board of directors agenda and not have to be, having a vote on proving what was discussed in committee and stuff, and just simplifying things further.
Thank you. That's an excellent question through the vice chair to Director Barkwell. Yes, really good question. And the answer really is in the different nature of the body. When we are sitting as board, it's a very formal session. We have process and procedure that are important to follow. We have just that degree of formality sitting as the governing body. Most regional districts and most municipalities have found that it's useful to have a separate forum in which, in our case, directors can have more informal discussions about specific topics, more generative. When we think about the modes of governance, we have three key modes. One is fiduciary, where the board is really playing an oversight role. The second, making sure that risk is managed, that the corporation and the regional district is functioning well and we're overseeing what's going on. A second is strategic, where you are thinking ahead, what is it we're trying to achieve and what are the paths we're going to take to get there. And then the third is more generative, which is, okay, let's back away from the table a little bit, figuratively speaking, and think about some of these issues collectively and blue sky a little bit and brainstorm different things and talk about the implications and speak in a very informal, relaxed way about specific issues. Committees of the whole are designed to provide the forum for that kind of generative discussion to occur that is more difficult to occur at the board table.
Gonna follow up, Director Barkwell?
Yeah, I've heard that about the committee of the whole, supposedly a little bit less formal stuff, but in practice, in all my years on council and RDOS, not full-time with RDS until now, but it's discussions around the table have been exactly the same, regardless of whether you've called it a committee of the whole or the board of directors. Nothing, as far as I can see, has ever changed in how we have our discussions. So in my mind, that makes it kind of pointless. The other question I have is, did you say you're going to take, what we discussed today and,
yes,
and give a report next?
Within the next month, if not, yes, yes.
So you'll have your report in the agenda before the meeting?
Yes, in probably the board agenda as opposed to committee, but yes. Depends what kind of discussion you want to have on it.
Director Holmes.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with the approach that's been presented. I also agree that there's a lot of things we do discuss in the committees, committee of the whole, which we probably could be discussing in the boards. Things like even this right now, this presentation, it's a committee. There's no reason why both of these two presentations couldn't have been in a board meeting. Delegations could be in board meetings. I think committee of the whole is great for, as you say, for the blue sky stuff, for really chewing on specific things. But we don't necessarily need them every time we meet. It's on an as need basis, and I think a lot of these things, not just for the benefit of us, but for the benefit of the public, would be better served in an actual board meeting. But in the general direction, I think that what's being presented makes a lot of sense.
Any other comments or questions? Director Gettins.
During my interview, I shared that I wasn't really in support of having a separate committee. And there's a few reasons for that. One, I do think that subregion isn't just limited to the two different valleys, but I think there's even subregions within those subregions that there's common things that we share. I think it's important that the municipal directors know what's happening in the regional district for a few reasons. When we're such a large board and there's more municipal directors here, so that means that there's, staff that work here, over 50% of the bosses of the organization and the governors of the organization are municipal. And I think it's important that municipal directors know what's going on from that level as well, that how much work the regional district is doing. And I think that I appreciate hearing, especially from Summerland and from Penticton, because most of my citizens live within those communities and work in those communities. So I also feel like with coming up to another election year and the amount of work that we need to do, I wouldn't prioritize this change that much, to be honest with you. I don't think it's that detrimental. I think using the short-term rental as an example of an ongoing conversation, I don't think that would have been any quicker had we had a separate meeting. We had separate meetings actually, and it didn't make it any quicker with the rules. I think that was a complicated thing to put on to rural areas. It wasn't as straightforward as some of the municipalities. So I think we should stay as a broader table. I'm not really convinced that this is worth the effort of creating terms of reference, ensuring how we get everything organized and put forward. So I'm not yet convinced, but we'll see how the conversation goes.
Thank you. Director Roberts.
Thank you, through the chair. And respecting Director Getton's point of view, but at the same time, I have the opposing point of view. And more often, like when we're looking at this discussion here, is that we have the ability, if a municipal director wants to be a part and listen, it's all there. But at the same time, for instance, on how we structure it, let's say you split a day and a half, municipal directors don't necessarily have to come in the morning or don't have to come in the afternoon at that particular time unless they feel that they want to be privy. I think in regards to having the by the whole, in regards to the general topics, I think we're going to be talking about a lot of those, like you said, the blue sky things and those issues. But as an electoral area, even discussing and everybody knows I'm a proponent of the sub-regional thing. And I understand in regards to what was said, there's not a lot there at the moment. But I think as the EA committee was set in place, that would actually show a little bit more of that is in play. For instance, between Area BG and the village of Karamias, we're one of the few things that we have everything kind of a mini sub-region because we have all these different service bylaws that we share where all the other districts have it singularly. You know, they have their fire department, they have their rec program, they have where we have our rec program, we have our swimming pool, we have our information stuff, we have our fire department. And so it does lend to a little bit of a difference. And again, very much similarly to what you're saying, that in your difference is that your particular area F really does center between Summerland and Penticton, and it does get a lot of its services connected to those. So you have a lot of similarities in that where we don't. And so I think there's value in the new format that would streamline things, but also provide the opportunity for everybody and anybody to fit within the discussion. And then ultimately everything has to come to the board anyways. So we have a chance to, you know, if we're dealing with something that's going to come to the board and we're concerned that municipalities might have a challenge with it, it would be then our responsibility to reach out to the municipalities and say, you know, this is coming and this is our reasoning behind decision A, B, or C. So anyways, that's my point of view. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I do feel that is a great reason to do a 6-month trial. It puts you into a mindset of you can either extend because you don't get a full feel for it, or wow, this isn't working. 6 months was long enough. That's the one downside to a year, in my opinion, is it puts you a little bit more at risk, and especially with the timing on an election a couple months after that. Director Coyne Sr.
Yeah, I see both sides of this argument, and I kind of like the idea of going with the 6-month trial period. I think that's a really good idea, and I think now is the time to do it, and kind of for the same reasons, but also exactly the opposite reasons of what was said. With the upcoming election in next year, if we're going to have a new format going into that election of how it works at the board table, people that are going to run for that are considering running for like a director's position in the next term, they could see how it works or may work in the new term, because it is going to be different. Like people who are like a municipal rep, like say somebody running for a mayor, they don't have to have that whole day twice a month to be able to devote to it. Or a person running for a director, area director, maybe that we would change things so that we would have an extra day a month or things like that, so it would be fair, more fair to the people coming in. But I do really support the idea of the area director committee, just so it can be a little bit more kind of, I don't know what the right word is here. It could be a little less formal and a little more, I don't know, the right word is intimate. Like you would just have the area directors that are involved that you could sit down and have these oddball conversations with that you wouldn't normally have with the whole committee of the whole. I don't think I'm explaining myself very well here, but it's sometimes you just really need somebody, another area director to kick things around with without having 21 people at the board. So I think it might work out better. Anyway, thank you.
Okay. Anything further? So this is coming back to us. So right now you don't need anything from us, correct?
I think we're okay. We're good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Mr. Nielsen, thank you very much for taking the time and presenting this to us today. We look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you for having me.
So we are at the end of corporate services. We would look to a motion to adjourn the meeting at 12:47. Got a motion, got a second. All in favor? Unanimous. So we have now 13 minutes before the next committee, but we're not stuck on it. So I'd say even if we gave ourselves a 20-minute lunch and started at 10 after, would that be good for everybody? CAO, that work? There you go.
Okay, it looks like it's 1:10. We'll call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Ask for someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moving on to the strategic priority, optimized development approval process. Turn it over to CEO and staff.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a 2025 board strategic priorities, and the purpose of this report is to provide options and seek direction from the board in relations to the 2025 strategic priorities entitled Optimize the Development Approval Process, with the staff recommendation being that the regional district undertake the following in support of the review of the development approval process as a strategic project in 2025. Rezoning zone review, residential zone review, development permit review, and subdivision approval review. There is a PowerPoint presentation and staff will answer any questions you may have.
You ready for the presentation? Then we'll turn it over to staff.
Okay, and while Adam pulls the PowerPoint up here, I'll just flag, I appreciate that it's the end of the day. I'm last on the docket here, and I think some of these slides are going to be more of a refresher for the board. I've sort of patched them together from prior PowerPoint presentations, so I'll try and move through them fairly quickly. So as mentioned, this is for the strategic priority, optimizing the development approval process. And just a reminder, on March 6th, the board adopted its strategic priorities work plan. And on that, under the planning items, was the following project. I'll just read from the slide. It says, optimize the development approval process to ensure that the approval function provides the land use policies for responsible and sustainable development to occur as required by small communities. And this project was assigned 400 full-time hours. And so just to start the background on the staff response to this request, I'm going to begin with the provincial development approvals process review. And the reason why I'm beginning with this is just at first glance, the strategic priority seems to resemble quite a bit the purpose of this report, which was put forward by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing back in 2019. And so the purpose of this report, quote, was to address challenges and identify opportunities for improvement in the current development approvals process and to support local governments in eliminating barriers to affordable housing and also to accelerate the construction of new homes that they need in their communities. And some of the, just a selection of some of the recommendations that came out of this report, there were quite a few, but these are sort of some of the key ones, was enhanced development finance tools. Some of this has now materialized with the recent housing legislation that the board is likely familiar with by now. But also items such as expanding subdivision approval authority to regional district approving officers, streamlining and reducing provincial referrals, similarly streamlining application processes, and also enhancing approval processes. And specific components of this that the board has previously grappled with are public input. So this would be in the form of the public notice bylaw that provided for alternative means of public notice. So in our case, that's the voyant alert notices that we send out on our land use applications, as well as delegating authority for land use approvals. So an example of that would be delegated minor variances that were introduced back in 2022. And so in the spirit of the DAPR report, the regional district has been quite busy implementing improvements to its development approvals process. And some of these were projects that directly came out of that DAPR review, such as the delegated DVPs and the alternative means of public notice. But it's certainly been front of mind for the majority of these projects for planning staff, looking at how we can improve our development approval function. Also of note, there were a few projects that did deal with the development approvals process, but ultimately were not adopted. And so this would include things like the environmentally sensitive development permit area review, which was undertaken a couple of years ago, and the creation of a favorable regulatory environment, which was the sort of quote unquote optional component of the small scale multi-unit housing amendments that the board would have seen last year. And so some of these optional components would have included simplifying the number of residential zones, expanding and enhancing permitted building envelopes within those residential zones, increasing density allowances for secondary or accessory dwellings, removing restrictions related to floor areas for those secondary or accessory dwellings, and eliminating or streamlining development permit area designations, particularly those ones that were seen as potentially impeding residential development. So naturally, the next section of my background deals with those small-scale multi-unit housing amendments that the board is quite familiar with after the bylaws that we discussed last year. But just a bit of a refresher, essentially what Bill 44 did was it created this concept of a restricted zone. And so essentially this was your conventional low-density residential zone where the only permitted principal uses would be a single attached dwelling or a duplex, and the only permitted accessory uses would be a secondary suite or an accessory dwelling. And essentially what the province did with Bill 44 is it rendered these restricted zones essentially defunct and instead mandated that local governments allow in their place zones that allowed for at least 2 dwelling units or 3 to 4 dwelling units based on certain characteristics of the parcel, such as parcel size, available servicing, location within an urban containment boundary, and so on. But in addition to those mandatory components, there were also there's also a set of policy guidelines that regional districts and other local governments were obligated to consider when adopting zoning for small-scale multi-unit housing. And this was in the form of the Provincial Policy Manual and Site Standards Guide. And the purpose of this guide was to create what it's referred to as a favorable regulatory environment for the construction of small-scale multi-unit housing. And in addition to this policy manual, there were a series of guides that essentially went through regulation by regulation, how local governments could construct residential zones to allow for small-scale multi-unit housing. And these corresponded to each of the various different density requirements that would need to be put in place. So that the image that I have here is the site standards for the 2-unit density requirement. And just a corresponding quote, the reason why the province was providing this level of detailed analysis on zoning regulations was in recognition that it's typically not a single zoning rule that's impacting the viability of small-scale multi-unit housing, but rather it's the cumulative or cross-cutting impacts of several of these regulations combined. So that's the reason why the province was recommending an approach to review all of these regulations in tandem. Just one type of regulation to illustrate what this change could have looked like. The current residential zones on the left-hand side there in the Okanagan Valley zoning bylaw generally allow front parcel line setbacks ranging between 6 meters and 7.5, whereas the policy manual was proposing a potential reduction between 5 and 6 meters, and so on and so forth for the other parcel line setbacks. In most instances, they're fairly modest reductions, and the intent was simply to provide flexibility to property owners that were looking to construct dwellings on their property. Also identified by this policy manual was the potential impedance of development permit areas on housing construction. And so the quote from the policy manual that I pulled here was that some local governments in BC are commonly using development permit areas to achieve objectives that are either outside the purpose prescribed in the LGA or that could be regulated in more appropriate ways, such as through zoning regulations. And so this was being flagged by the province as an area that could potentially impact the viability of small-scale multi-unit housing development. And because of this, the province was encouraging local governments to consider alternative approaches, such as zoning regulations. And out of all the development permit areas, the province was particularly focused on what are called form and character development permit areas, essentially development permit areas that are dealing with the aesthetics or the built form of dwelling units. And the reason for this heightened focus on this category of development permit area was that out of all types of development permit areas allowed for under the Local Government Act, this category has the greatest potential to negatively impact the creation of new housing units. And that in particular, when these development permit areas are exercised, that they can introduce significant time, costs, delays, and uncertainty into housing projects. And so just bearing that background in mind, I'm going to go for the next couple sections into some application trends that we've seen here at the Regional District over the last few years. And so the first section of slides here, they were pulled from some PowerPoints that we put together back in 2022, leading up to the delegation of minor development variance permits. And this was based on a manual tally of development variance permit applications between, I think it was between 2013 and 2022. And so as you can see, the blue on the right-hand side of this graph here, as well as the gray on the left, those would correspond to the residential and rural residential zones in the regional district. And it's about 60% or so of the development variance permits that are being submitted to the regional district. And similarly, this graph illustrates that it's not one variance type that is predominating. It's really the cumulative or cross-cutting impacts of multiple different types variances that are being applied in rural and rural residential zones. But I will also flag that if you look just at setbacks, that's just over 50, not quite 60% of all of the variances that are being considered by the board. Also looking at the trend line for decisions, we flagged at the time that about 96.7% of all development variance permits were being approved by the board at that time. And a similar, almost 90% number of DVPs were being supported by staff with a recommendation to approve. And at that time, back in 2022, only 0.4% of all DVP applications that were supported by staff were subsequently denied by the board. Also worth noting is the volume of applications that the regional district was receiving, substantially more than other local governments in the South Okanagan. If you just compare the rural area of RDOS, it's similar population size to Summerland, but substantially more development variance permit applications being received and processed by staff. And so I appreciate that that data is somewhat out of date now. So I did go and manually tally some statistics, just looking at the 2024 batch of applications. And as you can see, if you break down by the purpose of development that's seeking a variance, the number one reason is for the construction or addition to new dwellings. Next to that is accessory buildings, and then there's a substantial fall off from there for miscellaneous other DVP applications, retaining walls, fences, and so on. And then if you cross-analyze the purpose of the development with the type of variance being requested, you'll see similar trend lines to those graphs back from 2022. The primary reason for a variance for a dwelling relates to setbacks. Also worth noting is that there were no height variances being requested last year for dwellings, although there were a considerable number for accessory buildings. And then just a final tally of the DVP statistics from last year. 45 applications were considered in total. Out of those, 20 were delegated and approved by staff as minor variances. And this is holding constant with trend lines over the last couple of years. It's about 50-50 applications being delegated versus applications being considered for approval by the board. Out of the remaining applications, 25 were non-delegated, meaning that they required board consideration. Out of that subset, 19 applications were recommended for approval by staff, 6 were recommended for denial, and that's 76-24% respectively. And out of those applications, all but one were approved by the board. So it's holding constant with that data from 2013 to 2022, about 96% approval rate. Just moving into other application types. So the next one I have is development permits. And I'm just going to go through quickly a couple different development permit area types. The first one is the multiple family development permit area. This only applies in Okanagan Falls. It's one of 3 form and character development permit areas that we have in the region. The other one is the town center development permit area, also in Okanagan Falls, and then the Naramata Village Center development permit area. Just looking at this one in particular, it was first introduced in 1996, and it applied at the time to any development comprising 2 or more units. And just from a staff perspective, Okanagan Falls currently being the only designated growth area in the rural areas in the regional district, and the consequent upzoning required by SMA that would apply 3 to 4 units per residential property. From a staff perspective, this threshold is potentially too low now, as it would potentially be triggered for every single residential development. And just also of note is that since 2001, only 6 of these development permits have actually been issued, also calling into question the utility of this regulatory tool. Not related to housing, but also another development permit area with very low permit volume is the protection of farming DP area. This was introduced into the Electoral Area C OCP bylaw back in 2012. And it applied to lands that were within 150 meters of the ALR boundary. And also of note, there hasn't been a single protection of farming DP issued since it was first introduced 13 years ago. The last category of DP area that I'm going to focus on is the environmentally sensitive development permit area. And the reason for this is that it's the highest volume development permit that the regional district issues. You'll see this was pulled from the PowerPoint presentations leading up to the review of this development permit area. I believe it was 2 years ago, just indicating that there was a significant spike in permit volume starting around 2017. And at the time, we provided a comparison, just what types of development were requiring this permit. Prior to 2017, it was primarily subdivisions, about 73%. But after 2017, and I believe this was, and Chris can expand on this, related to some changes that were introduced to the DP guidelines at the time, we see a reversal, and it's now 82% of ESDPs being issued are for residential development. So that would be on land that was previously subdivided, had already been subject likely to an analysis at that time. And now that the vacant lot is being developed, it's triggering a permit requirement. And so Stantec did provide a report assessing the effectiveness of this development permit area. And concerningly, it did find that almost a third of all of the permits that were issued might have been unnecessary, either because the environmental features in question were not located on the property that was subject to development. They were potentially located on adjacent lands. Or another concern that was raised was land, as I indicated, that had previously been subdivided and may have even been subject to an environmentally sensitive development permit at that time, but was subsequently being duplicated now that a house was being constructed on the property. There were also some concerns about the distribution of development permit areas or development permits being issued across the region. About 36% from 2019 onwards were just in Electoral Area A. And if you break that down on an annual basis, compared to the average for other electoral areas, it's between 122 to 433% higher than the average for other electoral areas. The next application type that I'm going to jump into is subdivision referrals. So it's not actually an application, it's a referral that the regional district will receive from the Ministry of Transportation and Transit. And the reason for this is that the provincial approving officer for our region, as with most rural areas in the province, is actually with the ministry. And so when the regional district receives these, it's in the nature of a referral seeking confirmation that the proposal complies with our land use bylaws. And this graph just shows a breakdown, the number of parcels that are involved in the subdivision. As you can see, it's about 70% are 2 parcels or fewer, fairly simple subdivisions, all things considered. It's the relative minority that involve multiple parcels or are more complex in nature. And this just shows a breakdown of subdivision referrals by area. It does vary considerably year to year, but that was the trend between 2018 and 2021. And so as I noted, when the regional district receives these subdivision referrals, staff will review them against all of our land use bylaws. And this can potentially trigger a number of different development approvals. So with respect to the OCP bylaws, that could be the development permit areas. Zoning bylaws could prompt either zoning bylaw amendments or development variance permits related to parcel size, width, etc. Also, there are considerations around the subdivision servicing bylaw. This could also prompt DVP applications. Other considerations like the collection of DCCs would be raised in the review of that. And then there are other miscellaneous legislative requirements that staff would review, such as parkland dedication, highway frontage, and so on. And so just before I transition into the options that staff are presenting in relation to this strategic priority, I just thought that this would be a good transition. The concept of granting subdivision approval authority to the regional district has certainly been around for a long time. This was a news article from 1968 in the early days of the regional district. So just jumping into the options, the first one is the residential zone review, and really the reasons for this, just to recap some of those development variance permit statistics. Over 60% of the DVP applications are either in residential or rural residential zones. The top 5 variance types are due to setbacks. The DVP trends do echo the SMA policy manual, the cross-cutting impacts of zoning regulations. And the fact that 96% of DVPs are being approved to the board, at least from a staff perspective, indicates that there may be a disconnect there between board preferences for development and what the zoning regulations actually currently say. And so the nature of this zone review, as staff is proposing it, would be a full review of the RS and the low density residential and the small holding zones. And the reason for this is because there isn't a single variance type that's predominating. It does warrant a full review of those zones. And in order to reduce the regulatory burden on housing construction, staff feel that multiple changes could potentially be required. However, in response to public feedback that was received last year in relation to the SMA zoning amendments, staff are proposing not to review building heights as part of this. And also that is partly warranted by the relatively small number of height variances that are being submitted for residential uses. And just in consideration that a substantial portion of this work was previously done in relation to the SMA amendments last year, it's anticipated that only 150 hours would be required for staff to bring back detailed considerations on this. For the next option, the development permit review.
One quick question, if I can check with CAO. Do we want to deal with these one at a time? Is that, or do we want to try to deal with them all? Because it looks like there's quite a bit to kind of breathe through per each. Because you have 3, right?
I think one at a time. One at a time.
So if we can, then if we want to back up, because I think there's just 2 slides, this one and the previous one, and then open it up to questions from the directors that these proposed changes would make an impact, and questions that anyone might have. Director Monteith.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess I'm curious about capacity. Are you considering doing this in 25, 26? That's my first question.
Through the chair. So what we're proposing is that in 2025, we simply do the review. So that would be just scoping out proposed changes, and that would just be brought to the board for a decision whether they actually want to undertake bylaw amendments or whatever the eventual outcome of that review might be.
And I'm sorry, I have a follow-up.
Follow-up?
Can I ask what other projects we're currently undertaking and planning? Because we still haven't done the regional growth strategy review. Like there's other projects that I know we've talked about as a board that I guess I'm curious to whether this is adding more and we're not going to finish those items. What does that look like?
Get staff or CAO, go ahead.
If I may, these hours are already in the 2025 work plan. So it's not taken away from anything else that we promised to commit.
Okay. Director Watt?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just curious if we also have planned a stakeholder engagement process where we talk to potential developers, et cetera, to make sure that we get feedback from every side.
Staff?
Through the chair, we can include that as part of the review, and we can include that in, should this move forward today, in a forthcoming committee report.
Now, is it a safe assumption to look at that there isn't a lot of hands, that most people seem favorable to the first present or the recommendation? Just kind of get a read. I know we're not doing motions at committee, but just to kind of get a read of the room, it looks like most are in favor of what's being proposed. So would we, CEO, would then this come back to the board to approve?
Correct.
So right now, we're just kind of saying, hey, look, this number one, thumbs up, and then we'll move on to the board at the next meeting?
Chris?
Sorry, I'll let Mr. Garish and then.
Sure. So for the benefit of staff, I think today's discussion is to help us understand what was meant by the project being entitled Optimized Development Processes.
Okay.
And so we're trying to get a handle on what that could look like. And so the three options before you today are our attempt to put some ideas before you to see if you agree with them. And if you do agree with them in the context of this first one being a residential zone review, if you give us direction to go forward with this, then we would probably come back to committee with more specific proposals as to what this review could look like and make sure you're on board with it. And we would do that before we did any consultation with the community, because of course, if the board's not in favor of what you see before you, then there's probably no.
It wouldn't
offense.
go to the community, right? And will this be a choose option 1, 2, or 3, or is it possible to like that it could be all 3? What's the ask today?
Well, further to what the CIO said earlier, so there were 400 hours assigned to this, and so in looking at the nature of the topic and the hours that were available to be used on it, we felt that these 3 items could be accommodated within those 400 hours that were assigned.
So all of it already allocated in the 2025 work plan identified by the board. Yes, Director Giddens.
Well, I just wanted to double check. There's an administrative recommendation that we support this in these 3 different points that are coming up, or we abandon it. So I think I would like to hear a little bit more, and then I think we need to move a motion for direction on that.
Or all 3 at one time?
Well, yeah, I think maybe all 3 at the end of it. Yeah, because that's the administrative recommendation.
CEO, maybe just and then, yeah.
I think that the staff looks up for recommendations or take a look at where the board is going with this. And at the end, after you've commented on each one, you can make that recommendation.
Okay. Yep, sorry, Director Bob Coyne.
In this one here, the last bullet point you got there, will not review building heights. That is an issue over here with the accessory buildings that we really need to look at, because you guys go, like the planners go through all their criteria and then they say we're gonna, they deny it, and then it comes to the board, and then most of the time I recommend to allow it, because the building restrictions for accessories dwellings, basically you can have a 9-foot door in your building at the most, usually 7 by the way they're made. So it's antiquated compared to what people have nowadays for RVs and things that they want to put in their garage. So that's the one thing that I really think we need to look at out here. So anyway, that's it.
Okay, I'll follow up or a response from staff.
So through the chair, I mean, we're happy to do that. I mean, our concern here is that, and of course, this is just our informal takeaway from when the board abandoned the first go around on the small scale multi-unit housing, was that building height was a concern. And, the amendments at that time had proposed to increase it, but the board had made comments about wanting to actually go the opposite direction and reduce building heights. So we thought best not to touch it with this proposal.
But then you can't look at it.
Director Barkwell, please.
So as I recall, part of this is dealing with the number of variance applications you get. And accessory buildings was 6, I think. And, but nothing for height of other buildings. So it seems like if you're getting those requests for accessory buildings, you could at least add a review of accessory building height and not the main building.
Yeah, through the chair. So we're happy to take direction from the board on it. It's just the previous discussion led us to believe there was a concern about increasing height.
Are we comfortable with making that small amendment to consider the height for accessory dwellings? I think is that capture, Director Coyne, your concern? So can we? Because like you said, that doesn't seem to come up very often, and it shouldn't add too much, if I understand correct, it shouldn't add too much to the scope of the review. So we can just add that small amendment and, okay, then that's, unless there's any other questions, we'll move on to number 2, and then we'll deal with the recommendation at the end for all 3. Thank you.
Okay, so the second component out of the options that staff was presenting was development permit area review. And so again, similar theme to the previous slide. A substantial amount of work was previously completed for the 2024 small-scale multi-unit housing amendments. And these propose to repeal multiple development permit areas, particularly those ones that either had low permit volumes historically or applied to residential uses and could potentially be impacting the construction of dwellings. Similarly, for the ESDP review, Stantec did identify a number of serious concerns with the current ESDP process, such as unnecessary development permits, duplication of development permits, and the effectiveness of the DP scheme. Both of those previous bylaw amendments were not ultimately supported. But just in consideration that a substantial amount of work had previously already been completed by staff, the anticipated hours to complete this component is also 150. And what this could look like is a review of some or all of the development permit areas in those previous projects. And in relation to the ESDP mapping in particular, this could include like a desktop exercise, reviewing existing habitat loss and current development, essentially ground truthing that DP area. And I just included 2 examples on the side there where small intrusions of the DP area have prompted development permit applications, despite the fact that development was occurring in a previously disturbed area of the parcel.
Director Barkwell?
Legislatively, is there a possibility of doing like it's done for variances that these could be delegated? Certain, there could be a category that's small and can be delegated to staff. Is that possible?
Through the chair, the majority of the regional district's development permits are already delegated to staff for issuance, and it's in recognition that the issuance of a development permit specifically is always based on the guidelines that are written into the official community plan. And certainly we can, as part of this, revise or adjust any development permit guidelines. Again, just echoing Chris's comments in relation to the previous review, we're just seeking direction about how this potential option could proceed and move forward.
Anybody had a question from Director Gittens?
Yeah, thanks. Just reflecting back on the last time we talked about ESDPs. Is there any money available to do the updating to the map? Okay. If there's no money to do the updating to the map, I do think then maybe looking at an area approach, and I'm in particular, I'm thinking of Area A because of the subdivisions that have gone on there. I recognize that the higher one. So if we don't have money, I don't know what the difference is between not having money for updating the map and ground truthing, that kind of thing. But yeah, we just had this one not too long ago, so I'm just a bit concerned about that.
Staff, please.
Sure, just to help clarification on that. So I think after the board rejected the previous amendment bylaws, we did reach out to the federal and provincial staff that we had been discussing them with and asked about funding streams or grants that might be available. And at that time, I think we were told that they were fully subscribed for that year and the following year. And it would be some time before money could be considered. And even then, there was no guarantee that we would be qualified for it. And as I recall, there were some fairly onerous reporting requirements, which called into question the benefits of even pursuing the grant funding. So there is no large fund of money available to redo or to look at wholesale the existing ESDP areas. But so what we were proposing in terms of a desktop analysis, and I think this came out with some of the feedback that we received from the public during the previous review, is that the mapping may not necessarily be entirely ground truthed to reflect development that occurred in the interim or that had been maybe missed by the people preparing the maps. And there was numerous examples, and Ben's put two of them here, but where ESDP layers were shown over areas that were fully developed and there were no values left. So a desktop analysis would be us basically going through where there are ESDP layers over privately held parcels and just confirming that the ESDP layer is actually being applied to the natural environment and is not being applied to somebody's pool or their house or something along those lines.
Follow up, or that was good? Thank you. And I'm not seeing any online, no one in, okay, and we'll go with number 3, please.
Okay, and the third option is the subdivision approving officer review. And so under section 77.1 of the Land Title Act, the province does have the authority to authorize the regional district board to appoint its own approving officer. And just in recognition that the regional district does receive about 15 to 20 subdivision referrals each year, and each of these subdivision referrals can be a significant driver of subsequent downstream land use approvals, such as bylaw amendments, DVPs, DPs, etc. And just further consideration, the regional district land use bylaw requirements tend to comprise a very large portion of the conditions for each of those subdivision approvals. So when the regional district engages with the Ministry of Transportation, they will typically issue what's called a preliminary layout review, and typically one of the most substantial components on that review, outlining all the steps needed to achieve the subdivision, is compliance with the regional district's bylaws. And also, assuming subdivision responsibility for that reason could offer some efficiencies, doing all of that work in-house. And it could also provide enhanced customer service, providing residents in the region the ability to discuss their subdivision proposal directly with staff instead of being bounced between multiple agencies on a single subdivision proposal. Also adding that regional district staff currently do serve as the approving officer for both Caremias and Asuias as part of our contract planning services to those municipalities. So we do have in-house experience providing this service. That being said, we will have to acknowledge that this would likely have long-term staffing and resource implications. And for that reason, all that's being proposed with this review as part of the project scope is just exploring Ministry of Transportation openness to the idea and identifying any conditions that it may wish to impose as part of that if they are open. And just in recognition that this would mainly be correspondence between the regional district and the Ministry of Transportation, it's anticipated that this would only require about 100 FTE hours.
Director Bloomfield.
Thank you. Through the chair, are there any other regional districts that have approving officers independent of mine?
Through the chair, not that we're aware of.
So why would we look into doing that if it's not being done anywhere else?
Well, within the context of optimizing development approval processes and looking at the options that were available to us in the hours that we had, this was an idea that we thought, okay, well, 100 hours should be sufficient to scope with the ministry if there's any interest in even doing this.
Director Barkwell?
I can certainly see an efficiency in having it all in-house instead of back and forth with a provincial official. Is there, very roughly, there's a correlation between the fees for applications and such and the costs of our planning department. I know it varies tremendously from year to year, get skewed by some huge development or something, but could there be a sort of a cost recovery process or fees for taking this on and we kind of come out neutral?
So through the chair, it's an interesting question. Recognizing our experience with Caremias and Asuias versus what we do in relation to MOT referrals for subdivision, there's really not much additional work required in terms of the assessments that we're doing against the land use bylaws. So from that perspective, we don't think it would be a huge increase in staff resources. I think our concerns are more around Other considerations that currently the ministry looks after in relation to hazard lands, slight disclosure statements, some of those other aspects that we don't have to deal with as an RD, but that as an approving officer for the municipalities, we do. So there is a bit of a discrepancy there. But yeah, and I should add to, sorry, to your question, that we do already charge $1,000 base fee for subdivision referrals, and that increase is based on service areas. So it could be up to upwards of $2,000 for referral. And I mean, certainly if this came to pass, I suspect a fee review would be part of any discussion about taking that on. So.
Yep, Director Giddens.
I'll make the administrative recommendation, and I'll speak to it if I can get a seconder.
Seconded, yeah.
Thanks. I think it's a good time to do this. I think when you're coming to the end of the term, I think this is some of the most complicated work that people who get elected to this role probably have. New people have the least amount of knowledge. And it's also the one where you, especially as a rural director, you're most exposed to quite early on with citizens and expectations. So I think it's a good idea to take a look at this.
Any other comments, questions? Then it looks like, we don't motion, well, I guess we did motion, second, to make a recommendation to bring the residential zone review, the development permit review, and subdivision approving officer review to the, I guess it would be said back to committee and then to the board. So you'll have a report come back to committee. Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair, so I believe that would be our intention. If we're given direction today on these 3 items, recognizing that some might be able to come forward sooner than others, we would put together proposals, most likely in the form of amendment bylaws with explanations and presentations at committee to ensure that the board is okay with what's being proposed. And if they are, then go with those next steps, such as consultation, agency referrals, notifications, et cetera. So.
I think since we're, just CAO, quick question, since we're not changing hours from the strategic planning, because we've already done that at the board, we can do this recommendation as in committee and it can come back to committee without having to go to the board first.
Correct.
Okay. So I think it's not a vote as a motion, but all those in favor? Any opposed? Looks like we did that unanimously, so well done, everybody. Thank you. Anything further to add? I think this is everything we had for the agenda today. Unless there's anything else, I'll ask someone to make a motion to adjourn. And seconded. All those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.